How do you learn who you really are? It's not found in books. It's found on the battlefield. All right, what's up, warriors? Welcome back to the battlefield of the mind. Today, I'm with Michael Johnson, I think I would say certified badass. I'm pretty confident that's the correct term. But when it comes to combat training and comes to physical protection and altercation, this is one of the guys that you're going to want to learn from. So, Michael Johnson, welcome to the battlefield of the mind, brother. For the people who haven't got a chance to hear who you are yet, do the elevator pitch and let's jump into being awesome.
Okay. In short, probably one of the easiest things to understand is just kind of our family's history and lineage. My grandfather started with the martial arts back in the 20s. He's a black belt in judo and jiu-jitsu. He started training my dad at a pretty early age, 11 years old. And my dad went on to get different black belts and different disciplines of martial arts, but was perhaps most known for his training with Bruce Lee when he lived and trained with Bruce off and on from 67 to 69. And then after Bruce Lee died, my dad flew to China to go train with Yip Man, but he died before he got there. So he trained with Yip Chung and had the privilege and opportunity to do that. And then they came back to the States, opened their school. I started studying at 2 years old, kind of the same age I started my daughter at, and pursued it, but also had an interesting life that embedded and anchored more of that conviction, having a knife to my throat at around 5 or 6. This individual telling me that they were going to slit my throat and stuff my body behind the television so my parents couldn't find me. And they just had this very twisted mindset, right? And from there, I learned what it felt like to truly be helpless and what it felt like to not have enough strength or power to do something. And that motivated me to want to take my capabilities and understand how to push them to a level to help people who don't have a ton of training, who aren't big enough or strong enough, how they can actually protect themselves and keep themselves safe. And I started pursuing a bunch of different martial arts and understanding the arts, and realized very quickly that most martial arts is bullshit and it only works under very specific conditions. And then there's even these great arts like jiu-jitsu that are extremely effective, but they have their limitations and they don't work when you're dealing with multiple opponents or people coming at you with weapons and different environments. And there is no one system that's going to work against everything. And I really attempt to preach that with people and help them understand that the way you train something is what's going to make you effective. So you have to have that mindset. So I started pursuing the study of guerrilla warfare, counterterrorism, got a degree in criminology. And it was funny because in my first fight in 8th grade, still trying to do martial arts, the dude broke my nose and knocked me out cold because I was trying to do the shit that didn't work. Right. And it was kind of ironic because it was the best thing that ever happened to me. So Armando Lopez, if you're still out there watching this, I still remember your name and I'm very grateful for you. So it pushed me to go, man, what's the fastest way to shut down the human system? And what I ended up finding in my pursuit to study the best techniques was that the best technique is the mind, and the mindset and the conviction inside of a warrior and the ability to reprogram the reticular activating system and control panic under duress with simplified techniques is the most effective form of combat. So we started getting into more hypnotherapy and conditioning associative linkages and neuroassociative linkages. And I teamed up with a guy that's a real good friend of mine and part of my team now, James Serendip. He's a clinical hypnotherapist. And when I met him, I said, look, I want to figure out how to rewire the mind as fast as possible. I said, I want the matrix. I want us to be able to plug people in and them have such a conviction in their belief that they could go out and handle things if they have to. And mixing that with the conviction and mindset behind criminology and counterterrorism, and then understanding the principles of cultivation, if you will, that's involved in guerrilla warfare, we started putting together some really amazing stuff. And then we started putting together these meditations with binaural and isochronic tones and, figuring out ways to create the simplest system to shut down the human body of timers, switches, and mechanics. And we took our group of our guys out. This is, after I started formulating this stuff way down the road, and we got involved in something that it's underground fighting. We got involved in these underground fights, and we started taking people out to these things that had no training, and they were not fighters, and they were not combatants, and they were not people who understood martial arts to the level that I did. And we would train them for 3 to 6 weeks, and they would go out and be just crushing it against guys who had been doing it for 6 to 7 years. And we learned very quickly that if we measure, monitored, and modified the behavior, that we could actually get better results faster. And so that led into a lot of people seeing what we did. And that led into the privilege to train the 512th Rescue Squadron and be their honorary squadron commander out in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which was a huge gift. The Flying Skulls are a bunch of badass group of men and women that go into high risk and high stress environments and fly in and rescue them. And they're a rescue squadron, so they pull people out of combat zones, et cetera. And then that led into me. I think from there, I went to training the 459th Airlift Squadron out in Tokyo, Japan. And then next thing I know, I'm in Ecuador training the Special Forces and their Navy SEALs and the Defense Minister's bodyguards. And then after that, we're in South Africa training the Tactical Response Team and also studying their prison stabbing system that they have from the Poolsmoor prison under Nigel. And it just kept going and going and going. And it became more and more badass and more simplified. And then it went from, all right, we're teaching these techniques, but it's kind of an ancillary part to what we do. What we really help men do is go to war with the weakness inside of them. And as I was telling you before the call, we all have it as men. How fast can we overcome it? How quickly can we go to war with it? And so that's our conflict, right? Is inside. And my mission, both because of my faith and what I do, and I'm your weirdest Christian you'll probably ever meet. And as such, a lot of Christians don't like me, which is okay. I'm here to serve the Lord. But
there's a lot of irony to that. It's really funny because Christ was the weirdest Christian the Pharisees have ever seen.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and ironically, a lot of Christians are now the Pharisees and Sadducees of the modern day.
True.
And I think
isn't it ironic that people can all worship the same God of love and hate each other?
There's not only an irony in it, but there's obviously the contradiction.
It's all contradiction. That's what's funny about it.
Yeah, but there's also this thing of like, yeah, there is one true God. It's not like everybody, the guy that's worshiping a stone is also worshiping God. That's not true. That's not real. But the reality is that with that guy that's worshiping the stone, if you look at the phases of what Paul did, he still went and talked to that guy to help minister the truth to him through love and help him get there. But then we also have this very weird metrosexual version of Jesus, right? Like everybody's like, he was this guy that was just super chill. Dude, he was a rock star. Like he was a banger and he could fight, and people miss that. And that's what true warriorism is. It's not being weak and not being capable. It's being capable and choosing not to use it when you don't have to, right? Those tables that he flipped inside of the church, they weren't like Costco tables that were like, made out of styrofoam. Those were heavy tables, right? Like this man was strong. He was very competent.
Well, he was also not afraid to be highly disagreeable and piss off people in authority because it needs to be challenged. And that was something that Jesus did that very well, is he deliberately challenged people. And it was one of those things to make it so truth loves to be challenged. Lies hate to be challenged. And if anybody were to challenge you and say, hey, well, why do you do that? Or this doesn't work that way, and you ever get triggered, this shows your weakness. I believe your triggers are the celebration of your sins. And so Jesus would go, hey, I'm going to heal this guy, even if it's the Sabbath. He's like, hey, you're the one who's saying one thing and doing another thing. Like Jesus would challenge openly for truth. And that's some gangster stuff to piss people off.
Dude, I mean, 100%. And it's funny because people go, why are you a Christian? Was it because your parents? No, honestly, truth be told, that's what would have turned me from Christianity, was the way I grew up. Because, there was a lot of, like we go to church and there was this posturing of like, oh, brother, how art thou? And they're kicking the shit out of us on the way to church, right? It's because we weren't moving fast enough, and cursing at us and everything else. So it felt very hypocritical. But the reality was my faith worked when everything was failing. God showed up when no one else did. When I was homeless, he was there. Every time somebody has left my life, the only thing that has left evidence of truth is the fact that he never leaves. My Christianity is not based on what a church group thinks I should do, or that they don't like the fact that I teach people violence, or they don't like the fact that I use profanity, or all the other shit that they come up with that they don't like about me. It's based off the reality that Christ is always there for me and God's always there for me. And no matter what's been going on in my life, and no matter what has tried to break me and tear me down and left and walked out and abandoned and gave up on me, Christ has never left. God's never left.
He's relationship, not religion. That's where people have it wrong.
They miss it.
Yeah.
And then they go, well, this is what the Bible says. God's law is written on your heart. The Bible says that also. So stop seeking validation and permission and everything else that you look for in humanity, and start looking for the humanity inside of your own heart that God put there to have grace with yourself and forgive yourself, right? Like when people, and I love that you said this, Rick, because it's so, so true. When people, and I get this a lot on my Instagram channel because people are always talking shit, and they're like, I think I could kick your ass. It reminds me the importance of making sure that I'm always training.
It's an interesting thing just to go
challenge is good for truth.
I want to go into a thing that you just said there, where you're talking about like people saying like, I have a faith or belief in something that is greater than myself, be it Christian or a Christ follower. I don't think they're the same thing, by the way.
Agreed.
I believe that the Sermon on the Mount is the roadmap for like it's probably the most important speech ever given was the Sermon on the Mount. And I've studied it deeply. It still blows my mind because of the aphorisms that Christ speaks in. I can do a 2-hour speech on blessed are those who are poor in spirit. Like the way that Jesus talked was level 100th depth, and people will read it at face value and not understand what it is. So it's ironic that people will say, I, follow Christ, or I'm a Christian, which I don't think are the same. Christians are highly judgmental, which is really funny for Matthew 7:1. But it's ironic that people who are highly judgmental, critical, or want to do harm to others, or have all of these traits for hatred, are somehow a good Christian. And they would look at you and say, the first thing I want to do is kick your ass because I love God. And you're like, wouldn't we be better fighting shoulder to shoulder instead of against each other? It's one thing to spar, but it's another thing to threaten just because. What is the benefit of that?
Men can't, Rick.
Yeah.
And the reason they can't is they don't want to fight me. They're at war with themselves. And there's something in me that triggers them, makes them feel vulnerable and insecure. So they think in conquering me, it'll conquer them. But the only way to conquer you is to conquer you.
Yeah, the answers are inside. I think it's ironic on that one. That's really funny, man. What a funny thing to want to fight you because I won't fight me. I teach my guys this all the time. I'm like, so you're less afraid to fight an actual trained fighter than you are to fight your own feelings?
Well, I mean, it makes sense. Your feelings are your identity, right? Like fighting a guy on the outside will make me think that I'm something more, but people are afraid of what they think they are, the weakest version of them.
The definitions on this do have to be very clear. Shame and identity are very heavily linked through belief systems, but it's not. Feelings is one of the paths to get there, but your feelings are not your identity. It's your beliefs that come from the feelings that you have. And so fear runs through feelings to create beliefs, and then doubt will change your identity into shame. So there is a pathway to this.
Feelings are your identity when you haven't learned to master them because they run you.
It's only one part of us. Have you ever seen, I want to show you something that'll help you with this.
So I'm agreeing with you, but I'm saying the problem is that most men, and look, dude, I have recently been through some stuff that has really challenged my own reality. And I love what you said, because I saw this in that situation where anytime there was a challenge of identity or a challenge of truth, that individual got highly triggered, highly angry, highly stimulated, and highly attacking. And so when you sit down and you look at, and it's not that person's bad, it's just, it's a good place for them to have reflection, right? And I see this not only with men, but with women also. When we sit down and we really go into what does it mean to challenge the truth, people push against it and tell you that challenging the truth is bad, and it's not. Christ talked about it. Paul talked about it. Challenging the truth is what makes it the truth. It still works under challenge. It still works under pressure.
The intention matters. And this is where today's society challenges to be right and not challenged to connect. Like if I'm trying to say I'm challenging you because I'm right, well, I'm already wrong. If I'm right, I need to see if that actually works, because if it's better, I want to use it. If it's not better, I don't know if we should keep using something that doesn't hold up under a couple questions.
Well, dude, and that's one of the reasons that combat is such a purist form, right? Like if when people get offended and they go, this is the best art, it's kind of like trying to be right. Mm-hmm. And that's what I loved about Bruce, is that Bruce was like, let's test it, right? Like, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, let's pressure test this thing. Let's see if it works under real time. When people ask me if what I do works, the answer that they don't want is that It should. But something may happen that makes us have to go back to the drawing board and figure it out. What I can tell you will always work is that something's going to go wrong. And your conviction in that moment, because when people talk about like, what's the best technique? The dude that was convicted that didn't die, he created some shit in that process that was like, people were like, that was really good. How'd you do that? And then they built a technique. That's all martial arts is convicted people not wanting to die, getting pressure tested, making shit up so they didn't die, and then teaching it to other people. And they were like, this was a really effective approach. But the problem with that is that's what worked for him. And he was under a very specific circumstance. So let's take Bruce Lee. And this sounds like blasphemy coming from a guy whose dad trained with Bruce. If Bruce had to deal with jiu-jitsu guys now, jiu-jitsu wasn't around the way that it was back then. So he might have had a problem. But having jiu-jitsu there back then, he would have studied it, dissected it, and made it work, and probably would have made jiu-jitsu better than what it is right now. You look at wrestling, American wrestling, which I think is superior to most ground forms of fighting because they scramble and they teach you to get back into standing position. You do not want to be locked on the ground with another man in real time because you've got a couple of variables that go against you. Reality is dude, this drives me nuts. I don't know how to turn that thumb thing off. Sorry.
Keep doing it. It's awesome.
You have reality, and reality is there could be some girl because you're fighting her man and she runs up behind you and stabs you in the neck with a knife. The most violent encounters that police officers train. We train 19,000 officers through our approach in the Department of Corrections in the state of Florida. The most violent encounters that officers and any kind of individual will face is some kind of domestic violence relationship because she may have called the cops on you, but then when you get there and the cops are arresting him, she'll jump on the cop and attack him, right? So like you have this reality that life is dynamic. What you think you understand in the moment changes so fast. You're like, I'm a martial artist. I'm really good at fighting. And then a pit bull gets involved. And you're like, well, fuck, we never trained for that. Like, how do we deal with that, right? Like this dog's trying to kill me. And so the lurking variables are what will kill you in your head, in your heart, in your visceral, guttural sense, and in real time. And you got to learn to make those three tongues speak as one. And it's the hardest thing for men to do. And I think that's why your work is so important. You know, you were telling me a little bit before the call what you do. And I'm like, my mission has become so heavily ingrained in helping men overcome their weakness because I know what it is like to feel weak. I know what it is like to suffer. And any man who's out there trying to do the same thing and help men conquer it, dude, you get my high five in a heartbeat. Because I believe this, like, and you know this, I don't know if your listeners do, but like 80% of suicides, they're men.
Mm-hmm.
80% are men because they don't know how to get through it. They don't have the tools to get through it. They think that the feelings, again, their identity, in that moment, their feelings are going to be permanent and last forever. And I fucking get it, dude. Like I've been there recently.
It's overwhelming for these guys, and especially for the younger guys right now. We've been taking a lot of kids like 15 and teenage guys it's overwhelming information. And the problem is too much information, not enough good men for discernment. There's not enough good mentors because even our generation of guys is just fumbling through trying to get through their own shit. How can you teach a kid who now has he has access to all opinions, but your brain still has 10 years until it's completely developed anyways. And so now I've got no way to process, no way to measure up. You've got all of these liars who are creating Instagrams that they're multimillionaires by 17. Like that's what you're supposed to do. You're like, I'm still in high school, man.
And
like,
you
how
feel
am
like
I
a
supposed
failure.
to do that? Yeah, you're compared to people who aren't even authentic. It's it's a global comparison. And then you have all of this influence and information that's also wrong. I do trainings on this where I'm like, let's look up hypergamy. How does a woman choose a mate? And you'll look it up and it's total insanity. You'll look up what's a high value male and you'll see this list that's total fucking shenanigans. And these kids are like, I can never live up to this. This is impossible. And there's nobody to set them straight. Like, buddy, this is bullshit, man. That's not a real thing. But they don't have a discernment or training to recognize the difference between nonsense and reality. And so it becomes
hence
an
why
impossibility.
faith is so important, right? Because the spirit of discernment comes from the Holy Spirit. And I think that one of the things that we forget, and I was saying recently, I've been dealing with and I'm transparent with this stuff where I say, like, I have dealt with overwhelming feelings, like not the suicide concept, because that's just like I conquered that a long time ago. But there's a whole concept of like these young men they haven't conquered that yet. They don't know that you don't take yourself out. You just got to learn to sit in the pain, and you got to learn that it's not forever and that it's going to pass. But through the pain is the crucible. It's the fire. That's what's burning out the impurities and figuring out how strong you actually are. You just got to sit in it.
I'm going to challenge that one sentence to just sit in the pain, because it doesn't work. Here's why. Grieving is a skill. I'm going to put it out there. This is actually part of the book that's coming out this year for the Map Out of Hell. Grieving is a skill, and it's connected to different elements that people will try to bypass. Denial, bargaining, anger, sadness. These are things that if you're aware of what you're in, you can work into acceptance on each phase of these. But people will use denial, for example, as acceptance, because you'll know the answer is acceptance. You ever said the thing is what it is? You ever said that before?
When I was younger.
Yeah, but even still, the concept of this is what a lot of guys do. Okay, is what it is. What do I grieve through next if I say it is what it is?
I think the first thing you've done is you've removed your power. Nothing is what it is. It's what you make it.
But what do I do next? If I say is what it is, now what do I work through?
Good point.
Nothing. You stop right there. That's actually denial dressed up as acceptance. This is actually suppression. I'm not dealing with anything. A better term that I train my guys to be far more effective, like you said, what you do with combat is what I do with psychology, is what is the fastest way to do a knockout? And I can do a knockout on these things in one sentence. And that's aphorisms. That's how you get stronger. And so you're like, what's the most simple way to be genius here? That's what I do in psych. Instead of saying it is what it is, which is denial dressed as acceptance, you say, well, that just happened. Because if that happened, now what do I do? Becomes next. Well, now I have to go through bargaining. Is there anything I could have, would have, should have done different? This is where I could learn, but also create fantasies of like, well, I wish this would have happened. And if that would have happened, did this. And if I could do that, then she'd understand. And if only she knew this, and if only they knew that. We got to go through the bargaining phase. Yeah. And then you're like, okay, I can catch my reality of this really did happen, and I can't change the past to be different than it is. That's now I can grieve through that, and I have acceptance there too. Then I got to go through my anger. I got to go through the anger phase, and I got to know that what are the three categories you're angry in? Something was taken or something was lost, or this is unfair or injustice. This is wrong, or I needed something and I couldn't get it. You know, I needed to feel heard. I needed to feel appreciated. I needed to feel valued. I needed to feel respected. Whatever it was, you couldn't get that, and it's fucking wrong. And you need to work through like the anger element of it. Here's a fun fact for you. Do you know how angry you have to be to change time?
I don't understand the question.
Neither do I. How mad do you have to be to change something that already happened?
What's irrelevant? No matter how angry you are, you can't.
Makes it a lot easier to get to acceptance when you know that it's completely irrelevant to get angry over something that already is. I can come to acceptance of this a little quicker. Now let's go into your sadness. And a lot of guys, and this is where most guys will say, like, I don't cry, right? I'm too tough to cry. I realize this a long time ago. A lot of them have just
conditioned that out of themselves, and it's really maladaptive.
Well, what they do is it's converted. And so you still have all those emotions. You suppress that and push it into the other emotion. And so oftentimes guys are judged as being fucking assholes when really anger is how they cry. And that's the most common thing I'll see with the guys who can't be sad because that's too weak. Anger is them crying. My angry is my crying because I can't do the tears. So I'll just convert that over. And I did that for years. And this is the most common way I see most guys find, because anger at least looks like confidence. He must know what he wants. He's fucking loud. Like he must know what he wants. like he's at least making demands. He must have I don't want to fuck with him. He seems angry. That's dangerous. I don't want to fuck with him. That at least gives you something. Sadness and crying in the ball in the corner, you only get worse. And so guys don't do sadness. And so we have to also work through the sadness element of things. And once you can do that, then you can come to acceptance in all areas. That's grieving. This beats PTSD. This beats bipolar disorder. This beats multiple issues that people can't deal with. It creates a whole new system that doesn't need to be there for growth. is used as a disorder and diagnosed, and people go into identity instead of going into grief. And that's why they stay stuck there forever, because their trauma becomes their reality.
I like that, good call on that, right? Because I think sometimes you do have to sit in things and let it pass, because it's like food poisoning, right? Like it's got to clear itself, but it's how you're sitting in it. You're not sitting in it just to let the suffering take over. You're sitting in it with a very mission-based, deliberate strategy to conquer and overcome it. Whether it's a breakup, whether it's a lost job, whether it's you're in a lawsuit with your business partner, whatever it is. And so you're helping these men conquer the old strategy that is no longer effective, right? And when you do that, you get real results. And I think that's brilliant.
Yeah.
So good on you for doing
it's
that.
It's the same thing you're doing with combat. Is it's only trained or untrained, but is there a better way to do this?
Right.
But then you also have to be aware of the things that aren't yours that people try and take on too, like fear and doubt and excuses and distractions. These things will get you too.
Well, and then another thing I've noticed, people will blame you for the things that are in them, and they will try to trigger things in you to justify their thoughts of you in the way that you come across to them, so they can go, look, I'm justified, I'm right. And when you're dealing,
that's excuses. Good.
Right.
And you can see their curses. This is why trained or untrained is so good for that.
Yeah.
You can judge all you like. I know who I am, and you can't hurt me with something you make up. Like if I said, Michael, you're 10 feet tall. You're the tallest guy in the world. You're 10 feet tall, man. Well, you know what measurement system I'm using, right? but I'm using feet, right? So you understand how many feet tall you are. Right. And so if I say a number that's not true, if I said you're 2 feet tall, you're like, I understand the measurement system, so I know that you're incorrect because I know what the actual answer of who I am is. When somebody says you're a bitch or you're an idiot or you're stupid or you're a pussy or you're whatever, well, I know myself. That doesn't get me. Like the same thing as if you're 10 feet tall or 2 feet tall. I'm like, that doesn't even affect me. Like that's not even one of mine.
Right.
And this is where the trained or untrained thing, give me any judgment you want. You can call me stupid. I'm like, but I know I'm not stupid. So that doesn't even apply to me.
That recalls back into your conversation on identity. Right. So if you understand your true identity, that's really where that power is. And I think that this is, with a lot of men, they, we just started doing this thing for gentlemen that are going through breakups or what have you, because they attach their mission and they attach their identity to a relationship. And now their fucking identity just walked out that door. Right. So they're like, dude, I don't know who I am anymore because my mission and everything was wrapped in that. And I've been working with a lot of men, especially recently. They've been married for 20 plus years or 25 years. And all of a sudden their wife, and there's something, and I don't know what it is, but there's something going on. And this will make me sound like a conspiracy guy, but there's something that seems specific in the US where there's some kind of dial that's getting turned up and everyone's assimilating to this like mindset. We're like, oh yeah, I know I vowed to stay with you and to make it work and to be there, but I decided I don't have to anymore. My word is actually no longer my bond, and it's okay to quit. It's okay to bail out. And the men that are attached differently don't know how to deal with that. And so they're ending themselves. And so you see this in both the young group and also in the older men, because they actually have built their identity around this framework that's actually not their identity. But I understand why they're doing what they're doing and how they get stuck there. But I think this is why the work that is being done for men to liberate men from this kind of, for lack of a better phrase, like demonic possession or a curse.
It's not demonic. There is a curse there to it, but this isn't demonic. It's selfish. It's people worshiping themselves.
Which I would argue is very demonic.
We can call it that, but I have a very different opinion on that one, which is a lot more liberating because it makes it so it's an impossible fight versus one that's very possible. Free will has to have an element to the story. And so
100%.
There's a big part that I could get into if you want to get into that. But
if you give yourself over to it, that's what's allowing that to happen, right? That's the free will.
If you choose your moral compass is only my own and I get to make it up in the justice system that only works for me and it doesn't matter who gets hurt, that's a you thing, that's not a spirit thing. That's a person thing. And so this is where it gets a little different on that one. I think that to make the answer simple, men need men always. There's a lot of push that these guys are supposed to isolate with their girls, and that's supposed to be the only person that you need, while women are on social media, 8 to 12 hours a day being completely indoctrinated, which they learned even in the 50s with advertising, how easily women fall for the Jones effect. And so women are usually influenced externally. And there's a lot of things going on where women are being socially attacked. And because of this core sense of belonging, they follow the noise. And this is where, like, one of the more dangerous things for groups is having a woman getting divorced, especially the matriarch woman of the friend group, because she'll convince the other women to get divorced too. And then they do it.
And then their algorithm keeps feeding them that shit, right? Like there's nothing in there saying, hey, shift your mind.
Well, the lone wolves, this is important for guys. Men need men. Hard. The playing basketball with your boys or working on the car in the garage or whatever it would be. Men need men. And any guys who are isolated from their pack, the lone wolf goes hungry. The pack always eats.
Right. And I think it's, dude, this is why it's so important that the work that is being done by men to give men that tribe, because they often go, so what is the community? Or it's virtual. It doesn't work. Yeah, it does work. It's bonding. It's still bonding. Is it help to go do stuff in person? Absolutely. Unless those people are shitbags and they're like, let's go drink at the bar. That's not helping anything. You doing that in person isn't helping you. It's not helping the people around you. And I took a kid up a little ways ago. I say a kid, because I think you can relate to this. Like once you hit like your 40s, mid to late 40s, like all the guys in their 20s and 30s look like kids now. And so I took him up in the helicopter because he was just having a rough day. And I was like, why don't you come out with me, man? I'll take you for a flight. And it flipped his world. Literally different paradigm, right? Like we're up in the air, we're flying around, and he's just like, dude, this is badass. And I'm like, this is what exists outside of your imagination. And we need other men to do that for us, myself included. Sometimes, like, I'm the guy doing it, and then a friend will take me and go like, hey, man, we should go do this together. And I'm like, okay. And then oh, dude, thank you so much. And he's like, this is what happens outside your imagination, right? So, and I think that that's really where the brotherhood and the tribe needs it. And another thing that we're going to start doing, and one of my coaches brought this up to me, he's like, there's nobody better to do this. He's like, there's no rite of passage for men. And you have this way, because fighting used to be a rite of passage for men. You go to South Africa, they take a turtle shell and a stick, they kick the shit out of each other. And it's not about really winning. It's about facing your fears. And in the underground fights, we'd fight with sticks and chains and bullwhips and all this crazy shit, right? But it makes you face your fear. And every man, and this is where men really are different than women. Women fight each other and they fucking hate each other for life. Men fight each other and they respect each other at a new level. And they love each other like brothers. And that rite of passage for fathers and sons in men as a whole is so important, right? And it doesn't have to be like, and I get it, like if you're a real estate guy and you're showing up to work with a black eye or a broken nose, that's a challenge, right? I get it. There's ways of guarding against that and still replicating that rite of passage without having to deal with that. But it's so important for us because we need each other as men. And the irony is women respect you more based on the way other men look at you. And
it has to be both ways. We need to be tested in every category. 100%. We have to be. You'll never know if you're really good if you never get into any situations. And there's a couple ways that you can see who somebody is. First is give them authority or power. Money, fame, attention. You give them power in any capacity, you'll see who that person is. Right. The other version of it is if you want to see who somebody really is, have them lose things, lose everything. Let's see who you really are. Do you forsake? Yeah. Do you blame? Do you self-destruct? Do you destroy others? Like you'll see who you really are when you either have everything or you have nothing. It'll show you who you really are. And people today are afraid to be tested. They're afraid of being challenged. They're afraid to be punched in the face. And it's like you're not ever going to know who you are if you've never been tested. You'll never know.
Rick, you're 100% accurate. You're 100%. I think this is why, and I've been at both sides. Like when I was homeless, I lost everything. I figured out real quick who I am, right? Because there's nowhere else to go. And then you sit down and you get power. And then you start realizing your ability to do things and will you take advantage of it? And then you end up in this other situation where you start realizing that all these things are just ways of you figuring out who you are. That's the gift. That's the gift in pain, right? When you get punched in the face, you realize I can experience this and not die, right? In the underground fights, after I did so many, I was like, yeah, it's going to suck. It's going to hurt. However, 55 in or whatever, you're like, breathe, stop holding your breath. Because we do this when we experience pain. We hold our breath, just like when you jump into water. It's the same reaction that we have as a baby. So we have to learn to breathe. We've got to learn to get through it. You're not going to die, or you will. Just die well, right? So it's like there's like this level of understanding legacy. Like the worst thing that could happen to you is not that you could die. The worst thing that could happen to you is that your image is tainted and you actually stay alive through that. Like there's things worse than death.
The reputation demolition from being a coward or something, even like something that's inauthentic, disingenuous, bullshit.
And you'll see men kill themselves for that. Like they tried to stay alive and then became a coward and can't live with themselves being a coward, so they kill themselves. The same thing they were trying to ascertain, they now no longer can get.
Today's
and this
society,
is where the mind
I wish it was that simple. The fight's a little different today. I actually, I grew up in Sparta. Listen, this is one thing I appreciate with guys like you. Like they meet me because I've seen some of the interviews you've done. And I bet you sat at the table and go like, you've never been punched in the face before. Like you look at the
I
guy,
won't
like,
admit it, but yes. I mean, the moment you meet a guy, you're like, I could tell this dude's never been in a fight.
Yeah, you're like, you never fought anybody before. But this is where you know, because like, tell me you think I've never been in a fight. Like you can smell the hell on somebody. You can smell it. You're like, dude, you've been in some bullshit. Like you can tell.
Well, it's almost like a frequency that they resonate, right? And I think the real guys that have fought, like the guys that are on Instagram, and I was telling you, a lot of guys talk shit about me on Instagram, and I think that's just part. And I'm so grateful for them because they help my algorithm. But like, there's
me too. I got haters. They're the best. Some of my best publicity is haters.
100%, dude. And I'm like, then you kind of start posting stuff to make them hate on it. But you sit down and you look at the guys, because I've got some tier 1 dudes, some former SEALs, former CIA operatives, people that they've been in it. And I notice that they like my post. They'll say like a fire emoji, but that's it. The guys that are the insecure guys who've never been in a fight, they're the ones running their mouth for 16, whatever. And then even there was a guy recently that claims to be some kind of 82nd Airborne dude. He's like, I'm a killer and I've done this. The guys that are real, they don't do that shit. They don't go out there and go, I am combat, whatever. Because if they had, they don't need to tell you because they already believe in their capabilities. And so I had another guy who's a good friend of mine. He's really special to me. His name's John Riot. And he's like the head of, he did a lot of work for Facebook security and all sorts of stuff. And he went on and threw out a testimonial for us. And I always appreciate when guys do that. But I've gotten testimonials from CIA operatives, from like 82nd Recon, from like different levels of tier 1 dudes. And it's funny because you find out that the guys that have never done anything are the ones running their mouth. And even in the martial arts community, they're like, I'm a black belt in jiu-jitsu. I don't fucking care. That still doesn't mean anything to me. You'd still die. Right? Like the guy, like, congratulations, you have the discipline to stick with the discipline. I respect that. That'll give you. But will you go outside your discipline to test your truth? Because most of the time, those dudes, they'll fail under those conditions.
Well, they need to prove something to nobody. It's blessed are those who are poor in spirit. The humility. When I was training in Vegas, I was at Couture's gym, and I got to meet Martin Campman, who at the time was like number 5 in jiu-jitsu in the world. Like, he's fucking badass, and I got to hang out with him. Guess how much he told me he's a badass, and guess how much he told me he could tap anybody.
0.
We talked about his daughter's 2nd birthday. He was pumped about like clowns and balloons, and we didn't talk. There's no combat conversation. When I trained with like some of these guys, like, we don't talk about fighting things because that's just one thing we do. And so the same thing goes with being a good person as somebody who's competent and capable with combat, is I don't have to walk around telling everybody I'm a good person. If I'm a good person, you just be one. I don't have to tell everybody how badass I am to be a good protector. If the time comes, I'll protect.
They'll see. And the irony in this, and I struggled with this myself for a long time, and I think at times I still do, is that when you do it for a living, you have to like educate people on what you do. And it becomes a conversation. And then you kind of sit down and you're like, how do I build better systems so I don't have to have these conversations? Because I don't want to, right? Like I feel when I'm talking about the stuff that I've done in life, it's like it's important because people want to see validity. But at the same time, the real stuff I want to talk about in my life at this point is helping men get to the next level and how to do that faster.
Let's do one together. Let's show people what you're talking about. Give me one of the fights that you see your guys. Like, this is the big fight I see my guys come in with, that this is the thing they're battling. And let's you and I lock shields and let's phalanx this thing together.
Let's do it. I think the biggest, there's two of them, but one of them for men that I think would help them with the other is the imposter syndrome. They feel like they're fake because they have had to take their entire life and prove themselves over and over again. And the moment you do that, anytime you stand the test of truth, there's always going to be something new that's going to come out to challenge you, right? Because that's just how life works. And then I'd say the second thing for a lot of these men is the heartbreak. They and now I got balloons going on. I don't know what's going on.
Enjoy the balloons. It's a bit, man. Enjoy your balloons.
The second one is heartbreak, because they have wrapped their identity into something. And men, and I don't think women understand this, the way we work is we come into a relationship, or at least this is the way I've worked for a long time in the past, is that you come in and you're like, you kind of know you're fucked up in certain areas and you're willing to work on that. And it's a constant growth for a man because you shift, like, you know your strengths. You're talking about identity, but then you also know that you got your problems that you're willing to work on. And there is a natural state that I think, at least with a lot of the women of today, and I'm not blaming them for this, I just think it's programming, is that be a victim. Jump into this movement where men are bad and you're this. And so the guys almost become, there's this power play to poke and poke and poke these guys. I've seen this with my men where the woman will come in, she'll poke him, and he'll be like, I'm not going to be reactive. I'm going to be responsive. And after 4 or 5 days, everybody has a breaking point. And then he finally flips, says, cut your shit. We're not fucking doing this. And then she goes into victim mode, and it's almost a power play to manipulate him, because now she's like, you yelled at me, and now he becomes submissive to her manipulation, right? And this is one of the things that I think that men are struggling with a huge amount, because then she's got the support from a community to go, just leave him, Becky, leave him. He's emotionally abusive. And it's like, well, there's emotional abuse going on, but it's not him. It's you fucking with him, pushing him to the point where he finally fucking snaps. And then when he behaves the way that you have been behaving this entire fucking time, then you make him bad for it. And now he feels bad because he wants to be a good man and he wants to take care of you. And now you're manipulating him and making him submissive. So I'd say those are the two biggest things that I've seen men come to me with, is the imposter syndrome and then the relational part, where they're just like, dude, I don't know what to do. Like, I love my wife. I want to take care of her, but I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm the bad guy. And I understand where they're coming from. And I think you and I helping these men conquer this and lock in shields, like, let's do it, dude, because I think that's one of the biggest power plays that is used against men right now, is manipulation and a subservient. You need to be submissive, because if you actually take a leadership role, you're too aggressive.
It doesn't work like that. And these are easy. These are actually, do you know what the knockouts are? There's just, you know where the button is?
Tell me.
The first one for imposter syndrome is just doubt. And I'll show you how to kill doubt in 5 minutes. The heartbreak element, and that's multifaceted, because one is how to manage somebody who's using victimhood as their promotion, which is ironic. And this is for you guys to understand. If you're ever falling for the victimhood strategy, the victimhood manipulation only works on people who are nicer than the people using the system. This is important to know, is it only works on people who are kinder than the people using it.
Right.
And this is a good validation for you, where, like, am I a bad guy for not? It's like, no, this only works because you're a good guy, because a bad guy would go, fuck you, like, and leave. Like, so it only works on nice guys, because they're the ones who will go into what's called fawning, which is negotiating and destroying themselves to try to make somebody else feel better.
Which becomes dangerous, right? Because now you become this simp, and it's impossible. It's not your identity. And I would add to the fact that the guy that says, fuck you when I'm out, when he starts seeing that, gentlemen, that's not necessarily a bad strategy. Like, at some point, it's actually not a bad strategy. When you see somebody using that victimhood and they're trying to use it to manipulate you, that's not going to go away. that's going to get worse, and she's going to get more trained in how to do that with you.
Well, I call it the Little Shop of Horrors curse. You ever see the movie Little Shop of Horrors?
I haven't.
Okay, so it's like you ever play Super Mario Brothers and seen like those plants that come out, those big like Venus flytrap?
Yeah, they like eat you.
So the Little Shop of Horrors is about finding like an alien version of this Venus flytrap, and it wants a little bit of blood, and so it's like, give me some blood. And you're like, oh, I like blood, and you just give it a little bit of blood, and it's like, nom, 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 nom. It's like this little plant, and then it starts growing and growing. And this thing's like, feed me, I want you to feed me. And it starts getting you to want to feed it more. And eventually it starts going like, hey, give me a body part. Or, hey, give me the mailman. I want to eat a person. Or I want to eat this. And you start giving them people. And what I mean by this is you start sacrificing people out of your life, and they start isolating you away. You start sacrificing family. You start sacrificing friends. You start getting rid of people just to make this person feel better, because this misery equals love scenario. You can never feed it enough. And it only works on kind people. Yeah. Because, if you're a person who doesn't want to be left, you don't want to be like, I don't want you to leave me, and I need you somehow to need me. So it's ironic that a person who needs to be needed attracts or needs a needy person. And what I mean by that is, in order for you not to leave me, I need somebody who always needs something from me. That means people pleasers are often attracted to unpleasant people.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Warrior, thank you so much for being a part of the information that we have. And you're part of our story as we are a part of yours. It's very much an honor to be able to connect with each other. If you want to know more, or you want to get started with working with me or working with our warriors so that you can begin your path to authenticity, strength, leadership, and accountability, this is the way. Together, we are way stronger. Now you get to choose. Do you go forward or keep doing what you've always done? If you stay where you're at, hey, click on some of the stuff and follow what it is. We got motivational stuff. We've got podcasts. We've got more things. Just subscribe and do the stuff, and we'll keep you updated. But if you want to start going in, start jumping into what our programs offer and start your journey and being the hero in your own story.
I think that's a good point for men to think about, right? Like, and how do you get into a healthy relationship?
You need boundaries. You need healthy boundaries. And this is where people teach incorrectly. They think boundaries is telling people what they can and can't do. That's demands. That's not boundaries. Boundaries is only how I handle things. It has nothing to do with what you do. Yeah. I'll give you an example. If I was like, Michael, don't email me on the weekends. Don't do that. Is that a boundary?
Well, according to what you said 30 seconds ago, that's a demand.
That would be a demand. No, but if I said, hey, Mike, you can send me emails whenever you want. Just know I don't check them till Monday, and then I'll get back to you Monday.
That's a personal boundary.
That's a boundary. That means you can do whatever you want. I just won't get back to you till Monday. That's how I'm going to handle it. Yeah. If I said, don't talk to me like that, boundary or demand?
Demand.
But if I said, dude, if you keep talking to me like that, I got to hang up on you. Are you sure you're going to keep doing that? I have to hang up if you keep calling me names or just being like rude or disrespectful. So please stop doing that, or I have to hang up on you. You see, that's a boundary. That's just how I handle it. You can still say whatever the hell you want. I'm just going to handle it the way I'll handle it.
What's beautiful about that approach is that it removes the element of the argument of control, where a lot of people, this person's controlling. They're actually just setting healthy boundaries, and there's a consequence to your behavior.
The person who's trying to judge is the controller, and control kills love.
Dude, make a T-shirt out of that. Like that was epic, So like, I think that there's things that the real education has to be in knowing these things before you get manipulated by them for a lot of men. Yeah. And I
think know thyself, the 10-foot tall thing. If you know you won't fall for these tricks.
One of my clients recently went through a scenario where he's married for 20-something years. She started here's all the things that are wrong with you. And I left because of the stuff you did wrong. And he's like, dude, I did stuff wrong. And I'm like, I get it. So have I in my previous relationships. But the difference between the man and the woman in this relationship is she fucking quit. She abandoned you. She abandoned the family. She abandoned the relationship. She decided she was out because she didn't have the emotional fortitude to understand that you don't give up when you make a vow, when you make a promise, when you decide something. And her thing to him was, well, I'm not going to sit here and tolerate this. I don't have to be abused. And then she jammed out. She hooked up with another guy, right? And then he's sitting there, still loves her. And he's like, dude, I'm fucking wrecked. He's like, I don't know what to do because she left me. But now when I look at her, she disgusts me because she had sex with another man. But this is still the mother to my kids. And he's like, I don't know what to do. And he's stuck in the middle of it.
This is grieving. He's just grieving. And that's why I train this. So heart side stuff, that's grieving. He doesn't know how to accept the reality of things that already are. That's grief. You know, he doesn't have a disorder. He's not fucked up. He doesn't know how to go through a reality check. I'm like, did this happen? You're like, yes, it happened. Anything that you could have, should have, would have done right now to make it not happen, you're like, I wish there was, but there's not. It already is. I'm like, is it right to do this? Is it injustice? It's like, this is completely wrong. I'm like, how angry do you have to be to make it right? You're like, you can't. I'm like, okay, so anger is not going to work. And is it a bummer? Yeah, it's a bummer. Well, then cry it out, dude. Go in the shower and cry it out so you don't know if it's tears or water, and then get that shit out. And then let's go ahead and get to the acceptance of that is not your person. Otherwise, your person would never have done this. And that's not your person. Your person would never do this to you. And this person did that. Not your person. And that's okay.
And I think getting rid of that story is the weapon, right? Like that's your shield because we go, that's my, no, it's not. Because if it was, she wouldn't be fucking doing this.
It's not your person.
And you're like, yeah, but I felt and I did this and we talk about the commitment that we as men make that means a lot to us because, you know, that honor of the Spartan, right?
That's still denial.
Well, dude, she's not playing by your fucking rules.
But it's still denial. You're not accepting reality. It already happened, man. So you can still do bargaining and denial all day long. But at some point you have to go, this happened.
Well, and what keeps them in that denial is the imagination, the rumination, and the speculation.
Right. And that's heart side. And this means they're removing reality and reason for there to be a reason.
Yeah.
And that means it's a heart attack. Fear and bargaining fall on imagination and creativity. This is abstract thinking, which is actually a superpower. It's not a disability, by the way.
If used correctly, yeah.
Yeah, if trained well, it turns into clairvoyance. If untrained, it turns into anxiety. And so understanding how this is a skill and not a disability, it's actually very helpful for these guys. But they have to understand that fear is not real, and these guys are in make-believe dynamics because they don't know how to put their heart back together. We do a thing. I talked with Coot Blackson on this on the show. We talked about doing like a kintsugi concept. And what kintsugi is when like it was a Japanese art where you would break the bowl or break a plate and then you would put it back together. And for mortar, you use gold. Like you melt gold and use gold as the mortar to fill the cracks. And that makes it so the strongest part now of the bowl is the gold parts. The cracks are the strongest part of the bowl. But every time you break it, though, you use more material. And so the bowl will get a little bigger. And then you break it again and use more material. And now it's bigger. And you have to use more gold, more cracks. And you got to keep breaking it and you make it bigger. And we teach our guys when it comes to heartbreak is you have to kintsugi it back together, because if you show up in a relationship with a strainer and she gives you good love, it's just going to pour out the bottom. And you're going to be like, I got no love in here. I got no love. It's like, no, you have a strainer. You have to seal your cracks here, Bubs.
Right.
And so since you didn't put your heart back together, I see guys who do this all the time. They're like, please don't mess with my cube. Please don't mess. And I'm like, dude, you can't stop the world from fucking with your cube. You can't.
Yeah.
That's not it. No, we just solved the cube. Just let life get fucked. Go ahead. I'm like, okay, cool. That happened, man. Let me just go ahead and put my cube back together. We're good. I don't have to keep telling people not to touch things. I'll just put it back together. But if your heart breaks enough time this way, and you keep putting it back together, you eventually have a very big heart of gold, and you're not going to break it easily because I'm too good at putting it back together. So it's okay if you drop it.
And then understand that there's those women out there that are come to you knowing that they're broken, looking at you in almost like a narcissistic way, saying, this guy's going to fix me. And then when they see that you're human and that you're a normal person, they're going to demonize you and villainize what you're doing. And you cannot take that on as your identity. That is not who you are.
Well, no relationships will work if I'm expecting you to be the antidote for somebody else's poison.
And they may deny that, right? But and you can tell that they're doing it because they constantly will start to poke at you and try to create more victimhood behavior, but they'll also constantly fight you on everything, right?
But if you know thyself, that won't work on a man who's solid. It'll only work on nice guys and not good men.
But this is why we have this conversation now,
Correct.
Right? So that you men can start to identify this and understand that this is it doesn't make her bad. She's not a bad person. It's just her conditioning, right? And there will come a time where she will figure that out, and maybe you guys can be friends and you can talk. But like in the meantime of your relationship that's driving you fucking batty, like you're losing yourself in this process. And what you need is not that woman. You need yourself, you need God, and you need a good core group of men to actually really start reinforcing the ability to do kintsugi, right? You say kintsugi?
Kintsugi.
Because when you look at that and you're like, dude, my brokenness, especially for us as men, our brokenness is our power. It's the ability to rise from the ashes.
It can be. And that I agree with you very much on. You have two paths. You can choose the path of the warrior or the path of the damsel. You can choose your path.
Right.
The same situation, but most people who choose the damsel, life happened to them. The warrior path is to grow, and that means life happened for me.
For them. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it goes two extra stages, and that makes it so you go to higher levels. But
so what are some, and I think that this is really important, is that there are drills that we use to create neuroassociative linkage.
Correct.
And conditioning inside of our warriors as we train them. And people, there's this, and it's a disillusion. They say, well, you got to train something 10,000 times in order to be able to do it. And it's bullshit. No, you don't. The 10,000 times has already been done. You just have to reconnect associative linkage. So like turning a doorknob is the same as crushing a human throat. You just have to change the associative linkage. And when you do that, there's no 10,000 times. It happens overnight. Learning how to transfer an emotion into a productive indicator to change your thought process and your behavior, I'm thinking is the same way. And I want you to speak on this more so, because
belief systems, not emotions. If you start with emotions, it's like trying to navigate weather. If you start with belief systems, you get into core pieces of yourself, and you can change a belief system instantaneously.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Eye-Opening Moments podcasts are real-life stories of adversity, encounters, and perspectives. They are moments that can lift your spirits, give you some food for thought, or move you. For the introspective mind that likes to reflect, discover, and find solutions or meaning in a complex life, listen to Eye-Opening Moments podcasts.
So it's ironic, right? Because the combat's the same way. Mm-hmm. I would take these men through these guided meditations, and these are not physically fit men all the time, right? Some of them are like they're a king, but it's like the Burger King. Right? So I've taken them and said, look, let's wrap you into something different here, right? So we'd sit down and we'd run them through almost like a hypnotic meditation, saying, this is your training, this is where you've been. And we'd walk them through this journey that in the meditation in hypnotic meditation would be maybe 15 to 20 minutes, but they have shifted their belief system. Mm-hmm. And we'll pull them out of it, and then we'll make them train. And they're moving, dude, like guys that have been doing it for 15 years.
That's awesome.
It's insane. It's like awesome. And when you try and tell this to martial artists, they're like, oh, you're a bullshido master in your McDojo life. No, you fucking idiot. You're just ignorant and you don't understand psychology. So I'm not going to try and help you with that on Instagram. But like the reality is that like when you understand the power of belief, dude, it is mind blowing. Dude, I used to be homeless. I own a helicopter now and I get to fly it around like it's badass. I live in the nicest apartments in Arizona. And it's not about the money. That's not the principle that I'm trying to show right now. What I'm showing is it's the power of belief, because I didn't have the money, but I started to believe. And belief created everything that I needed. And that's what Christ taught us.
Very
right.
Correct.
So when you start understanding belief, you become a PhD in psychology. Right? Because that's really where it's at. And when men can change their belief systems, and I 100% agree with you on this, And I would love to see some more of your strategies on it, because it's funny when you're in the picture, right? Like you can't see the shit around you. You're like, dude, I'm stuck in this thing. But I would love to see your other perspectives on it also, because there's a level of doing it in combat, but I know that there's a level of doing it in the way you approach it. And you said, I don't know if you told me earlier your background in psychology, but obviously this is something that you've really developed. And
the easiest way to say my background, because it doesn't matter my doctorates or certificates, my background is incompetency.
That's, it's the only thing that matters.
Yeah. I've saved thousands of lives, and I've worked with thousands of people their lives are substantially better because of what I've taught them to do. My psychology does not create dependency. My community is because people want to help more people get out of hell like I pulled them out. That's it.
Dude, we gotta team up on something and build some badass stuff, because we've had guys tell us that we've kept them from killing themselves because they came in. And I'll be honest, like here's my strategy, okay, Rick? I show tactics because it's fascinating, but my real thing is teaching people belief systems and bringing them into that community, right? And when we do that, guys have come in and they're like, I came in because of the tactics, but you actually saved my life.
Correct.
Or you saved my marriage, or you saved me of being a father to be a better son. Because I was able to help my son or my daughter because I started at this level. And I'm like, they come in, and I think this is important for men also to realize. You may come in with a certain amount of guilt, a certain amount of shame.
Shame is bad. Guilt is good.
Like get rid of the shit.
Not really.
Dude, let
me teach you. You want me to teach you one of the most masterful? This is actually how you kill depression for shame side in just a few minutes.
Let me finish what I'm saying, so that because we may be saying the same thing, but I am 100% open to hearing what you're going to say. My point is this: if you allow your belief system and your identity to be that you're a bad person, you can't move on. When you're willing to sit down and just go all right, you fucked up. Use it to not do it again, but don't make it your identity so that you sit in shame. So I wanted to say that before you jumped in. So, because I think we might be saying the same thing.
The thing that's tricky is you are right. And what I mean is that is the answer. And this is where I say the Rubik's Cube, I know the answer. All the colors are the same. I know the answer. And you're all right, you know the answer. Do it. And you're
how do you get there?
Mine isn't doing it. I know what it's supposed to do. I know the answers, but mine's just not doing it. What am I doing wrong? Am I a piece of shit? Am I a fucking idiot? See, nothing ever goes my fucking way, man. I know it's supposed to be all the fucking colors, but why isn't mine doing it? And that's what I watch guys do all the time. They think the answers are the solutions, and it doesn't work like that. And so I want to give the solutions to make it so you understand how to get to those answers. You are correct. I have not found anything where shame has been a benefit. It is a completely unhelpful system. The only thing that shame is helpful for is to make somebody with high potential useless. That's the only thing I've seen that's what shame does. Now, guilt is very helpful. Very, very useful. Do you know the difference between guilt and shame?
Tell me yours. I know if you ask the Catholic Church, they will tell you a very different definition of guilt.
Well, because that's control, not God. So in which case, guilt is feeling bad for something I did or didn't do. Shame is feeling bad for what I am. Now, if I made a mistake, let's say I was supposed to pick you up from the airport and you're sitting there for 20 minutes and I'm 20 late, and I show up and let's say I feel bad for it. Because I either didn't leave early enough or I got there late. That's did or did not do something. If I show up and with accountability, this is how I can show people not to use I'm sorry, which is a shame system too.
Versus
I apologize. Michael, I'm late as hell. I hate that I had you standing here like this because that's not my intention at all. I didn't realize traffic or what this drive looks like. Next time I'm leaving 30 minutes earlier to make sure I'm waiting 10 instead of you waiting 20. You good with that?
Right.
Good. I did all accountability, acknowledgement for you. I can see how I can get better. And next time this will never happen because I just grew from it. I leveled up. Guilt showed me how to be a better person because I can immediately I can see how to improve. If I showed up and I was like, Michael, I'm so sorry. I'm a piece of shit, dude. I suck. I'm a fucking loser, man. I should have and I didn't. I suck at this. I'm an idiot.
Yeah, I'm going to get a lift. That's fucking depressing.
But you can see, what did I learn? What do I grow from? How do I get better? How are we improving? And that shame system, there isn't a use for it. It doesn't get beneficial. Now,
Right.
this is where people are struggling, is because shame stacking upon itself is where depression starts to sink in. I am a piece of shit. I am not good enough. I am never going to be loved. I am not worth listening to. I am never going to have a dream. Like I am. And that didn't start off in there. Those belief systems came externally. This is why people are caught in this for a long time. And this is one of the reasons my book coming out beats depression in one fucking day for anybody who shame stacks. Today's psychology teaches you to manage, cope with, or medicate the shame system that you live in. And what they do is they say your identity of shame is something that you need to manage. It doesn't come from shame. Your identity came in from an external source. This was one of the enemies within that attacks spirit side. This one is doubt. It came in from a source external. You are not good enough. You are a piece of shit. You are a loser. You can't do that. You have stupid ideas. It's a you that it begins with. Now, doubt is easily defeatable. And when you understand how to beat doubt, you can go back to the original contract. So I'm going to tell you how it works, and then I'll tell you how to kill it. Doubt comes in and it comes in through motivation. I want to lose weight, or I want to get stronger. I want to learn how to fight, or I want to learn how to build a business, or I want to have a relationship. I have a goal or a dream or a vision, something I want. Somebody says, you can't do it. You're not good enough. You're a loser. You're whatever. You. Well, you go through your belief system on triangle belief, potential. I can show you this on my map if you want to see how I break down human behavior. You want to see it?
It's your call, brother. Let's do it.
It's pretty cool, man. It's pretty cool when you see.
I think it'll help the listeners. And I think what's really important here is that there's so many people that don't understand how to navigate that territory. So if you have a map that's like, hey, here's my X line.
I've run this map by a lot of experts. They're like, this is one of the best human behavior maps I've seen. All right. So let's go into the enemies within here. Let's talk about doubt. Doubt comes in on something that you want to do. I'm motivated. Your motivation will have a feeling that's attached to it. That's why feelings are one of the cores, but it's not your core. Then it goes to your belief system and it goes into your goal system. I believe that I can. How much potential do you put in? How much actions do you give? And then the results that you give that reinvigorates your attitude or belief about whether I can or can't do it. So let's go ahead and throw the monkey wrench in here. You're not good enough. Well, I have an idea that I thought was a good idea, but maybe I'm not good enough. That makes me feel kind of bad. Well, do I believe that I can do it? Well, how much potential do I try to give if I don't believe I'm good enough? Well, I'll give a little bit of action and let's see what happens.
Which obviously is not enough.
Not very good results. Well, how does that make me feel attitude or belief wise? Well, that made me feel worse. Yeah. So I'll try again and even less action, getting even worse results. Somewhere between here to here, from those bad results back to my belief, you are not good enough turns into I am not good enough. When this happens, a funeral starts. Your loss system gets kicked in. This means the part of you that was like authentic, wanted to dream, believed in yourself, you can do it, dies. But we don't know how to deal with that. So what do? Suppress it. I don't know how to deal with that. So I push it down and push it down, push it down. I don't deal my anger. I don't deal with my sadness, and I don't deal with all the ways that I could make it work. I never get to acceptance, and I just stay stuck in here because I don't even know what died. Now the I am not good enough goes into your feelings and then starts to manifest in here. And then it stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks. I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm a piece of shit. I'm a loser. I can't. It stacks and stacks and stacks. Then you get stuck. That's when apathy kicks in and hits depression. Guys don't know how to do this. Now, how did this whole thing get in here? This is where you see people go into your identity and let's talk about your habits. Let's talk about your faith. Let's talk about your stuff. Let's talk about how you feel. And they don't ever get to the core. How the fuck did this thing get in here? Let's go kill this. If we go back to the original contract of you're not good enough and we go back and resend that deal, then shame doesn't get a chance to work. So what I want to teach you is the definition of doubt is that doubt offers you nothing, but takes from you everything.
Yeah.
Here's what I mean. I've got a dream to start a business. You're not good enough. These are two different offers on the table. Oh, Okay, well, what happens if I do fulfill this potential and make my business work? Well, you can have, financial freedom, security, stability, help out more people, have fulfillment. Like there's a whole list of great things that come from following your dream.
Right.
Or you're not good enough. What is this offering?
Well, but the other thing that I think is important to look at there, Rick, and it would be, it's unique, is that nobody believes that unless they think they're getting something from it.
Let's see. This
So
is
they're
important.
still getting something from
Let's
it,
follow
right?
that. Let's follow it. What do I get if I say you're not good enough? What is the offer? What do I get? Like, does it make my idea better? Does it make me go faster? Does it improve me? Like, you're not good enough. What do I get? What's the offer?
I'm talking about the person. If a man is thinking he's not good enough, he's getting something from it, right?
Follow me. Let's see. Let's test it out. We got to read the contract. You
get to be right. You can prove that you're right.
That's self-fulfilling prophecy on belief systems. But one of these belief systems will work because you're right either way. You're going to be right no matter which one you pick. It's just which right do you want?
Good point. Okay.
So no matter what, you're right. So if you believe in you can, or you believe you can't, either way, you're right. So you're going to be right no matter which one you pick. It's just which offer is better. So you got all the potential that could go good, or you're not good enough. What does this one? Let's read the fine print. What does this one offer you if you take this offer?
Tell me.
Nothing. You don't get anything. You're just not good enough. But you don't try for anything. You don't do anything, and you don't get anything. You get nothing. It doesn't offer anything. Now, one of these offers,
thinks he's getting something from that.
No. They'll try to justify later with, it stopped me from failing, but it guaranteed your failure. You're getting nothing. This is where I'm trying to show you. I have to challenge. This psychology is different than manage, cope, or
but this is good.
Medicate.
This is good because they've been conditioned to think, I get something from this. And the reality is you only get loss.
You get nothing, but there's a change though. Remember, you can only pick one contract. If I choose the nothing contract, I have to forfeit my potential.
Yeah.
But if I go with my potential, then I forfeit the nothing contract. You can only pick one of these belief systems. Now, as a child, you don't know how to read the contracts yet. And so you won't have a defense if dad says you're not good enough or your mom says you're useless. You won't have a defense against this to challenge it. But as an adult, as a trained warrior, you can go back to your old contracts and go, let me look at what was the sales pitch there. And I can go back when someone said, you're not good enough. And I say, I can see that this contract offered me nothing. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to crumple that contract up. And I'm going to go back and grab my potential for something I do believe I'm good enough. And if I do believe I'm good enough, let's go back to my shame system of I'm not good enough when I do believe I am good enough. Now I have what's called a conflicting belief system. This means I have cognitive dissonance. I know something is wrong, but I still try to do it anyways. It's like it doesn't really work. Now I've created conflict in your mind. Only one belief system works. Either you know I am good enough and I can, or I believe I can't. But you just got rid of the contract that says you're not good enough. So that doesn't exist anymore. So I know I'm good enough and I say I'm not good enough. One of these is totally bullshit. Mm-hmm. My algorithm in my head isn't working right anymore. One of these has to go. And when you start seeking authenticity within an instant, you start seeing that belief system was never mine and it offered nothing. And it took everything from me. Everything that I believed in myself on, it took all of it. And I got nothing. Once you understand how this thing works, you can do this 100 times a day. Like, you're not good enough, dude, or you'll never make it. Your business is going to fail. And you're like, are you offering me like a suggestion to make it better? Or are you trying to improve it? Like, what are you offering
just being a
me?
Dick?
Well, it's okay though. If they are, that's okay, because then I can see what is the offer. And that's okay. Like, because I just want to see what you got. See, what I'm doing is I'm challenging forward. I'm not managing. I'm not going back on my heels. I'm not hiding or suppressing. I'm not medicating. I'm going, what do you got? I'm going forward. And that's different psych right now, because today's psych is saying manage, lock in, dig in, stay still. I'm hitting for the knockout right off. Before I even apply this system, what do you got? And they're like, I got nothing. I'm like, nothing. I'm going to decline that before you even get to swing.
Well, and I think this is all warfare, right? It's just internal.
Yes.
So you've got to learn that concept of improvised tools. If you try to use the weapons everyone else is using, and you're not aware of what yours are. I mean, King David did this, right? Like he had a different weapon that functioned differently. And when you have the proper weapon in your hand, a stone becomes very powerful.
Correct.
Now, I think it's also important to point something out here. Everybody says, how did David kill Goliath? But most people don't read the Bible, so they don't understand he actually killed him with a sword.
Cut his head off. Yeah.
He cut his head off. But he killed him with his own weapon. David didn't bring a sword. He knocked him down and out with the stone, ran over to him and cut his head off. And then he killed his army with fear. Because once he held his head up and said, the living God did this through me. This is what we're going to do to you. Everybody was like, ah. And then everybody behind him got supercharged. Everybody in front of him got fearful. And creating this improvised way of looking at how to handle a threat, there's a few things there that I think you pointed out that are really important. One of them is understanding the threat. If you see something as a threat that's not a threat, you're going to behave in a way that you shouldn't. But once you understand what the true threat is, you can go after it with innovation. And it doesn't mean you got to use the ways that aren't working, right? And we know that there are certain behaviors that are just not working with modern day psychology, right? They're like, stay here for 6 years and we'll talk about your issues with your dad. And you're like, fuck, dude, I don't want to do this anymore, right? Like, and so you just end up stuck. Well, you don't want to be stuck. You want to be free. How do you do that? You got to go after the real threat. And then when you go,
there's only two kinds of men. There's only two kinds of men in both of our fields. There's only two kinds of men, trained or untrained. You either know how to do it or you don't.
Well, and in that process, it's okay to be untrained if you're willing.
Because then you can learn. Then you can be trained.
Then you can learn. And I think the hardest part for men is being shamed and them thinking it's a shame to not know. That's one of the things that I think makes me extremely effective. And it was funny because I went to this event and they were doing a pull-up.
You had the answer too. I just want to point out when you said, I want to bring back the to be shamed part. Go ahead, the story.
There was a pull-up competition and I wasn't even ready for it. And it was this fitness guy that's really big in social media now. And the girl that I was with at the time, she says, you should go do it. And I said, I didn't come for it. I know they're doing an exercise. I don't want to. And she goes, no, you should get up there and do it. Well, the short version is I could tell when every other guy was going to drop out because as he started doing pull-ups, he started looking at his muscles. He was trying to see what he looked like. My weapon has always been that I don't give a shit what I look like as long as I get to yes. And so I go out there and I do the pull-up thing and I beat everyone because I don't mind shaking. I don't mind looking bad. I don't mind looking like I'm weak, but I'm going to win, right? And I think that this is the part that for men, and maybe you can bring it back to the concept of the shame here, that this becomes their enemy. They're afraid of what they're going to look like. And in the end, it becomes that self-fulfilling prophecy. Stop caring what you look like because the image of your diagram that you just did there, that mind map, you end up sabotaging yourself with this belief because you're like, but what if I look bad? Who fucking cares? Get to yes.
Look bad for who?
Well, and that's the real question, right?
Who are you worried about? Whose opinion is important?
That's the old contract. The old contract was taught to them somewhere along the lines. And that's the part that curse breaking that you're talking about. That's how you break it, right? You break the old contract. For me, for a long time, guys were calling me the defense hacker because I could take somebody with no capability whatsoever and teach them in a day and they'd be beating people who've been doing it for years. And everybody's like, that's not possible. It is fucking possible. We've been doing it. When I went down and I trained the SEER school for the United States Air Force, I don't know if you're familiar with SEER or not, but there's a SEER training in every military branch. It's survive, evade, resist, escape. And it's a type of training that they do with people that are pilots or diplomats or, they're not necessarily warriors. They're people who are allies to the country. And if they have a certain set of skills or knowledge in their head, if they get shot down or kidnapped behind enemy lines, how do you not fail? How do you return with honor so you don't give up our country's secrets? And that's I think in this case, I can't remember how long they have to train the guys, but it's not long. And they were bringing guys in to train them in the combatives. And they were saying, hey, we want you to teach these people because they may have to actually execute some combat while they're over there. But we only have so many days and we got to teach them all this other stuff. We got to teach them social engineering. We got to teach them escape and evasion from legal restraint. We got to teach them all these different things. I said, absolutely, I can do it. I'd be happy to. One of the biggest compliments I got was they said, you're the first guy who's come down here and not try to make our guys a black belt. And everything that you taught was real, relative, and raw. And every person who comes through the school can learn it, and they can learn it in a couple of hours, and they can execute it in a couple of hours. You're not trying to teach us how to make them jiu-jitsu black belts. And I was like, dude, that's kind of the fucking point, right? Like, it's great. Look, and I'm not trying to bag on jiu-jitsu because I actually love it. Jiu-jitsu, Thai fighting, boxing. I love all martial arts as long as they get tested. Right? Like, these guys are like, I hit you with my energy. I'm like, all right, probably not. Right? Like, there were guys that I believe could do that like hundreds of years ago, but like with TV and social media and everything, people just don't have the discipline right now to exercise their spirit with that level of capacity. Or at least they don't, I should say. But there is a huge thing when we really go out and we make stuff work under pressure in real time, and it works. And that's what this is about. It's breaking the old contract. The old contract is you have to train for years. And it's a belief system they're taught. It's not even their fault. They're like, you must train for many years, walking with water on head, up mountain, down mountain, skip over alligator. Like, that fucking shit is not real. You don't have to do that. If I fucking stab you with a fork in the throat right now, it works. How long did it take for you to train that? I can teach that to my daughter, right? And the reality is, and this is why a lot of guys get PTSD, is that a kid who's 10 years old in South Africa that picks up a gun during war and points it at a soldier, the end result is the same as though it was from a trained, weaponized killer. And then they hurt because they have to kill that child because the end result was the same. The old contract would tell you he has to be a special forces guy, but the reality of physics is, as soon as he pulls the trigger, the bullet does not care. Whether that's a woman, a child, a cat. Once that trigger gets pulled, the end result is the same. So you got to break the old contracts that are holding you in bondage, that are holding you hostage, that are holding you in falsities, and realize that the truth is you don't have to train forever. You just have to do it correctly and more efficiently. And I love this. Like, your listeners don't know this, but before we jumped on this podcast, we got to sit and chat for a minute, and you're like, this is how I make psychology different. And I thought, badass. You're doing in psychology what I do in combat, and what I also do with men using combat principles. And this is why I think you and I are going to hit it off so well and ultimately end up creating something, because I use combat principles the same way I teach guys combat to overcome their inner demons, mixed with what you're doing. Ooh, that'll be dark. Like, it's going to be the ultimate, approach, right? Because when we sit down, the real thing that we don't get back is time. So the more time you waste doing what's wrong, or ineffective, I should say, like, your life ends up becoming a shit show. Because you're wasting all this effort and energy on doing things that just don't work. And everybody says this does work because somebody's getting paid for that methodology to be promoted. Because they're putting you on fucking pills, or they're putting you through 120 sessions, or they're putting you through whatever. Like, anchoring, I'm okay with you doing 120 sessions to anchor, but I can teach you what you need to know right now in an hour. Now we just need to anchor it. Right? Like, so it's getting to yes. How do we do that quicker with men? And the hard part is that men are ashamed to walk away from the contract because people they loved and cared about told them it was real.
They're not taught to challenge.
They're not taught to challenge. And they're not taught to go against the grain. And they are taught that if you do challenge, it means you don't love or respect the person who taught it to you. And that's actually not true.
It's the opposite, yeah. You can't be loved unless you challenge.
You can't love unless you challenge.
Correct.
Right? Like, I mean, every argument I have had in a relationship, I personally believe, as long as the person is willing to stay and work through it, actually makes, like, good times don't make a relationship. No. Your ability to get through the hard shit is what makes love in a relationship real. If you're like, we just fight a lot. Well, let's stop fucking fighting. What's causing this? How do we get through it?
Even fighting your partner is a waste of time.
It is, because you're really not fighting them. You're fighting yourself.
Well, you're supposed to fight with your partner together, not each other. Things that come in, you fight as a team. You fight every day. Whatever comes at our family, whatever comes at our pack, we team up on that shit. We fight together. You don't fight each other. What a waste of love.
Well, and here's the other side. If you're afraid of being wrong,
you
will always fight each other.
Well, you're already wrong if you're worried about being right or wrong.
Well, and I think that's the weapon that is ingrained. And I say weapon because I think it destroys the relationships.
It does. It's control. Control kills love.
Like when somebody wants to control the relationship. And look, I believe as men, we have a hierarchical role to lead.
Yes.
I don't necessarily think that control is useful. And it's kind of that boundary setting, right? Like when you sit down and go, these are my tolerances. This is what I will and won't have because I'm not going to check my email on the weekend. You can send it. You can do whatever you want, but I'm not going to check it. Mm-hmm. I think those are important things to be taught early on because when we try to control, the other person's going to resist.
They should.
And this is something I didn't always understand, right? But I also found that through that resistance and them trying to control me, I resist. And before you know it, you're on opposite ends of the fucking spectrum. And then when the other person's like, I'm out of here, and they keep running and running and running, and then you're trying to hold them in, now you've just created a shit show, right? Like there is no value to that, no benefit to that. And it's very cowardice. Like as a warrior, right? Like I'm like, you don't run. You stick in and you figure shit out. But if you're trying to control.
It's different. I want to challenge that one thing because this is Earl Nightingale. He's especially societally with how you see relationships work. The opposite of courage in today's society is not cowardice. It's conformity. It's just conform to what they tell you to. Just conform. Just be what they tell you to. Just shut the fuck up. Just sit the fuck down. Just do what they say. Give them whatever they want. It's conformity makes you disappear.
But if you're always running,
you're chasing at that point. Whatever you need, yes dear, whatever. If you start chasing,
I mean, there's nothing.
Leading.
There's no real value there, and you're like, look, like I think for men, especially right now, is such an important time for them to learn how to take that stance. And I'm not trying to demonize women here because I think that the reality is, a lot of women are dealing with their own pain and their own hurt and their own methodologies, and thus causing more pain inside of the men. And the men aren't at a point where they can really. We talked about this, right? Like they're not having the group of men around them that they need. Instead, they're seeing the way men are behaving on social media. These thirsty, weak simps. They're like, I'll give you whatever you want as long as you sleep with me or as long as you talk to me. And like, fuck that. I'm not giving you shit. Like you need to actually, like this has to work together as a unity. How are we both adding to each other? And if somebody asks you or calls you on your bullshit, and this is another thing that I've really started to embrace because I think men do this very well. We don't always do it well in relationships, but we do it good with each other. If you're a growth mindset individual, when someone calls you on your shit, you don't fight it because you're insecure. You consider, is there something here to learn from? I had an experience. I was in Costa Rica 2 weeks ago, and the guy that I'm with, my Instagram guy, who I brought him on full time, and he does all our filming. He wasn't getting any sleep because the howler monkeys were messing with his head. Right? Like I love them. I love them because it's in the jungle, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. They're going, and I'm just like, freaking makes me sleep better, right? So like I'd fall back asleep. He'd stay awake. And after so many days, he's like, dude, your intensity, like with me being exhausted and you being intense, he's like, it's messing with me. And I was like, all right, well, at first it bugged me. It was kind of annoying in my head because I'm like, what do you mean it bugs you? Like freaking, but I got curious instead of getting angry. And I said, tell me more. He starts talking and he's sharing with me his viewpoints. And I feel helped me grow as a man because he's a younger man. But he's just sharing with me his feelings, and I want to learn to make people feel safe for sharing their feelings with me because it can be intimidating to do that with a man, especially a man that can kill you, right? So when you sit down and you start sharing that, you go, should I share this? How am I going to get better unless I allow you to? So he went through a whole series, and he shared a ton of stuff with me. And I'll tell you, Rick, it was one of the coolest things because as he shared it, he started getting excited because he's like, hey, can I share another thing with you? And I was like, yeah, tell me. And he's like, I think you do this too. And like, there did get a point where it got a little annoying, but I sat down and I said, yeah, man, tell me more. And then I was like, maybe there's something here. You got to get curious when men are sharing stuff with you.
It's a big part of your leadership that needs to be done. One thing that people don't know, because I really do the deep work with people, and when they come into my community, I think it's very important because I have a creed. We have a creed we live by. And rule number 7 is challenge everything, especially the leader. And this is the number one way you can tell, too, if you guys know if you're in a cult or not. If you can't challenge the leader, you probably are. If you can't challenge. When the
there's
guys
some weird
come in,
shit out there now.
Oh, of course. It's all control, though. If you cannot ask questions or challenge the leadership, like for whatever reason, whether because they use a Bible or because they use whatever control systems they use, if you can't ask questions or challenge, you're probably not in a healthy group. It's important when guys come in to work with me that I say, you need to challenge me as hard as you possibly can right now to see if I'm competent enough to lead you. We have to battle first thing.
I think that's honorable, man. I think that's honorable.
If I'm incompetent, if I'm useless, if I'm giving you bad advice, if it seems self-serving, if it doesn't hold up, don't work with me. It's not healthy.
I think that's good. I mean, my men challenge me. And I told this to the Department of Corrections because I was down there training them, and I was working with the special teams, CERT, Rapid Response, ERT, K9, all those guys. They're in the room, and there's like 15 of them for the first class. And they had just had an instructor come in that was like hurting them, trying to make his ego bigger. And nobody was allowed to challenge him. And keep in mind, dude, like I'm 5'9", I weigh about 160 pounds. These are a bunch of big ass Southern boys. Mm-hmm. And I go in there and I'm like, look, guys, just for the record, any of you can challenge me at any point. And here's why. Because what I'm teaching you has to work or you'll die.
Yes.
Because you guys are going out in DOC, like these are all the guys going after the escaped felons and sometimes going and getting guys out of the city who have escaped prison or whatever. Like the dude doesn't want to go back. So it's life or death for him. And even more awkwardly, sometimes they're going through swamps. So they're not just dealing with regular conditions, right? Like they're going through, there's alligators. They're going through some shit. Dude's painted his face. They told me one story where this dude like had pressed himself in because he figured they wouldn't come into this area with alligators in it. And he like covered himself with mud and they were standing right next to him and they couldn't see him. And then one guy noticed him because I guess he blinked or something. They're like, get him. And freaking, that's a different fight. Like you're not doing that in the cage. And then you're still trying to be aware of alligators and everything else around you. So like there's this whole approach of challenging is healthy. And I say I made the mistake of telling them that because for the rest of the fucking morning, guys were attacking me left and right. At one point, like I'm getting carried carried off into a corner and like big old guys got me. And again, I said they're a bunch of Southern boys, great dudes. And the guy was like, he's wearing you like a hat, Billy Joe Bob. He got you. They were taking me, slamming into stuff, we're shutting off lights, but they saw it worked in real time. I think that that's an admirable trait inside of a leader, as long as you do it with respect.
Yes. You
can challenge other men with respect. And I think that is the key variant that men need to remember. You can't just be like, well, I'm going to challenge you all the time because you're just an asshole. Like it's important to do it with intelligence.
Well, you challenge for growth and competency. And so like, this is where like, hey, can you really do it? And then you just have to show them like, I got this. And they're like, yeah, okay, cool. You got it. Okay. Where are we going then? You don't have to do this every 5 minutes. Because guys understand this. Once you're like, oh, okay, he really knows his shit. Yeah. All right, let's see where we're going then. That's all I needed to know. And so I learned this with men is they'll ask a couple questions and go like, hey, are you going to lead me down the wrong path here? And a lot of times it may even be loaded deliberately. And just to see if I catch it's a loaded question.
Yeah.
And I'll catch it and I'll go, it doesn't work like that, but this is the way that it would get you what you need. And they're like, that really sounds good. I would like that. And then from that point on, we're back in like, hey, let's go do some work together.
Dude, I think that makes sense. And I think they should challenge you and they should challenge anybody who claims to lead them, because if they ride them off a cliff, dude, that's an issue.
It's a bad leader.
And it's a bad leader. And I think that there's a lot of coaches out there. And one thing I will say is that I did some coaching in one of my previous relationships with a guy, and he had the majority of what he did, I will say, was really good. But I also noticed that there were a lot of things that he did that actually undermined my authority as a man and created more challenges inside of that relationship. And so there were things that I was attempting to not challenge, because that was one of her arguments, is that every time you go into something, you challenge and I'm like, there's a fucking reason for that, right? Like I don't want somebody driving our family off a cliff this person. And I think that that's important, not only in combat, but in education and in men's coaching and everything. And so challenging the leader, it has to be a certain way so that you can make sure that you are still the leader of your home.
It will in multiple capacities. That's why when you were talking about shit tests too, like when women start poking and poking and poking, I don't believe the reality on this is that women want men to be weak. I don't believe that, because whenever I talk to women, I have women's groups. Whenever I work with women, they highly respect a man who has strong boundaries and holds the line. Like, I'm like, no, I won't fall for that. And they're like, oh, okay. And like, it does create an element of reassurance knowing that this guy will stand up to you. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of guys need to do that in a cool way. Like, you don't have to fight and raise your voice. I don't even have to. My girl and I don't even fight. Like, I've got 5 girls in this house, just so you know. I had to learn tonality because I speak Spartan. I'm from inner city Detroit. I grew up in a fucking rough area. Yeah. And so like the way that you speak, I speak your dialogue. That's why, like, I could talk with you all day and your energy doesn't fuck me up because that's my hometown energy. It's like, hey, I got a fucking story for you, man. Let me tell you what's going on. You're like, yeah, tell me the story, please. Like, it doesn't mess with me. That's regular kitchen talk to me. My girls don't speak that dialect at all. And so you have to learn those tonalities. But yeah, you learn from going through some of these very difficult things. I lost my train of thought of where I was going. What was I saying?
About women shit testing.
Good. Women shit testing is necessary. I don't believe they want us to fail. I think they want us to show that we'll hold the line. And a lot of these guys are pandering to their bullshit like you have to validate their emotions. No, you don't. In fact, they want you to stand up to them, but not angry, not mean, simply saying, honey, my intention is never to hurt you, but I'm not doing some bullshit that hurts the back. Yeah. I love you. Slow it down. What do you need? And I got you. And they're like, okay, that's all I needed to know. Like, good. They don't want us to fail, but we don't have to go above, like, we don't have to stab them in the neck with a fork to show that I can just stop your hand. You know, like, you don't have to go level 10 if it only requires 0.05. Like, this
my representation of that, by the way, was not for your relationships, Jeff. Just in case that was not clear.
Well said. But this is in these dynamics. Like, my girl will do shit tests, and when a lot of these guys are taught, especially by not having good men in the house and having to pander to mom's emotions, the mother curse, that they have to feel responsible for their women's emotion. Mm-hmm. This is incorrect. No, it's okay that she has her feelings, but she may not know what she needs. And until she does, you don't do anything. Don't do more, fellas. Do less better. That's Dwayne Knoll. He's a friend of mine. And so when you get into some of these dynamics, you're watching, women are supposed to shit test you to know that you'll stand up to her. Because if you won't stand up to her, how the fuck will you ever stand up for her? Yeah. You can't protect her. And I just did a podcast that was just myself talking about bad psychology on this, where men's groups, experts, there's psychologists, there's coaches, and there's people who use that system called Weather the Storm. And some of you will know some of the groups I'm talking about because they're not small groups. But their coaches and their experts are now in my group because they're like, this is way better training. That's destroying relationships. Yeah. The Weather the Storm is let the woman unload on you, and you show that you're safe and solid by just taking all of her shit, and you just let her unload it on you.
It doesn't fucking work, dude. What happens is it gets worse and worse and worse, and she just unloads more and gets angrier and then doesn't trust you. And Correct. Then because she can't trust herself because she feels more unstable. And then before you know it, she's packing her shit, right?
Well, she destroyed the safety security system. She destroyed the protector.
Right. And she didn't even intend to. And I think that's the sad part, right? Like, I don't believe, and I will say this openly, every relationship that I've had that in some way, shape, or form didn't work out, I can't look at the woman in that. I have to look at myself and what did I do that didn't provide that feeling of safety or love or caring or whatever. And when women go, like, we'll say crazy, it's not that they're going crazy. They're women. And there is a level of that they are testing you to see if it's safe. But also there's a level of guidance that they're looking for through that also has to be a safe and spiritual guidance. And I'll tell you, I haven't always done a great job at that, but I am also learning, because I think life, and people look at us as coaches and they're like, dude, so you figured it out. Well, I figured some shit out, right? Like, I figured out the stuff that I'm coaching you on, but I'm going to be studying to the day I die, right? Like, I have coaches and I continue to learn because I feel that that's how am I going to grow?
Yeah, you have
right?
to.
And you can't just do it because of a relationship. You have to do it because of you. And so there isn't, we can look at things and say, okay, there are these tendencies inside this woman that are problematic. It's all a challenge and a test for you to be a better man.
Yes.
And I haven't always looked at it that way, right? And I think that's a really important distinction for men to understand that, yes, there are issues going on, but what is so important is that we don't allow for those issues to control the identity of who we are as men, because we lose ourselves in that process.
It's an opportunity, not an identity. Yes.
It's an opportunity to grow. Your identity is the conditioning that you choose to make your identity, because you are whoever you say you are. And so if you sit down and you go, oh, just fucking women are all fucking crazy. Guys are all fucking angry and crazy too, dude. We're all, oh, look, a thumb. We're all, we're all at this point, you know, where we sit down in life and we're like, dude, we all have issues that we're working through. The question is, will we stick with it to love each other enough so that we can succeed together? And if we're not, you abandon the relationship and you abandon each other, that's really just you abandoning yourself, because you're not facing yourself. And there comes a point where you have to like level up, dude.
Well, that's true. It's the only way. You have to keep leveling up. But if someone's going to say, follow me, you have to be able to answer where.
100%.
You know, but they're supposed to test you out.
Yeah.
I think that the relationships really are a reflection of the stability of the guy. That's why I train men far more. Women aren't built to lead. And I'll challenge any woman that you can give me, because I can break it down at a psychological level. They don't want to lead either. I have women's groups, and they actually do very well when you give them the strongest elements of what they do. We're not built incorrectly, but they're not built to be the front line.
The only thing I'll challenge on that is that the women in your groups are the women that have the knowledge to know that they're searching for something. There are women that don't want to be led, that want to be the leader, and they do challenge.
They don't do well, but they don't do
They don't do well. They don't do well.
Relationships all fall apart. The women who are in the front, there's a reason that we're built with the stability as men that we are. There's a reason why we're sturdier physically and mentally. It's the yin yang concept. Men are stronger mind and body, period. But women are stronger heart and spirit. But it doesn't mean that we don't have heart and spirit and they don't have mind and body. That's the circles in the yin yang. We still have those, but our strongest main elements are the other side. Well, men need to be more logical, linear, tactical, and have I'm focused. I can explain why it is that we're doing what we're doing, because there's a mindset to it, and there's a physical element of I'm in front to take the hits so you don't have to.
Yeah.
If it goes wrong, it's on me. I'll take accountability. It's on me. I'm going to take the hits. Let me in front. Women are stronger emotionally and stronger spiritually. They are the inspiration forward. They're the muse. They're the why. Women can lift a man up to the heavens to fulfill his potential, or rip him to hell and destroy him from the inside out. Nobody's opinion matters more to a man than his woman's. And so the power that she has there is unbelievable. But women do not build structure. This is where it's important. If a woman says, I need space, it doesn't mean push her out the door. What she's saying is, men, have your mind, heart, body, spirit, walls solid for her, and the space in between is for her to work it out. I keep her safe. She makes the space a home. Give her space.
She's got to be able to be that woman to do that, though, too. And I will tell, like, because there's the women that you're talking about that are like, they want to be led. And then there's the women that they will tear that man down. Like you said, they'll rip him down to hell. They can only tear down an untrained, weak man. This only works on a guy who doesn't know the difference. I don't think that it's just about weak men, though. I think the untrained part, yes, but I don't think he's weak. I think what it is that he's just untrained and he doesn't know better. Sure. And his natural responses are what's coming out. And that is a training. And once he gets it, because you yourself just said, and I think this is really important for men to understand, especially if they're hearing this for the first time, it's not that you're weak. You're battling a weakness inside of you, because there are so many systems out there doing it incorrectly that are saying, you know, hey, listen, the way you do this is you let her vomit all her shit on you. And we just talked about that, right? Like they're literally trying. These men are really trying. They're not weak. In fact, it takes a lot to allow a woman to do that. But at some point, that fucking shit doesn't work, right? They're just like, okay, I'm just getting bashed on all the time. So the weak side, no. The trained side, yes. Allow yourself to get the training.
I'll fair with that one. I'll agree with you there. Okay. I'll redact the weakness, the untrained element.
I think it's an important distinction, because I think
right.
the men that are listening to your podcast, as well as the men that follow me and do what what I'm teaching them, I don't think they're weak. There's just weakness inside. And that weakness typically comes from ignorance.
Correct.
They're not intending to be stupid. They're not intending to be weak. They just don't know. And they're searching so hard. So I think that, like, in order for that message to be heard, because I think what you said is so important, let men know that there is a strength inside of you when you get trained properly to execute that, and understand that your woman, and even, the previous, any relationship that I've been in, I can honestly in my heart look at it and go, I still love every single one of those women for the traits that they had that were great. And I can walk away and go, you know what? Here's the areas I should have worked on better. Here's what I will execute in the future, if there's still an opportunity to do that with whatever I choose to do in the future. But I will also say that I think what's a really important thing about what you do for men who may be struggling in a relationship, do not feel weak by admitting the fact that you feel weak. Fair. Because you'll run from guys like Rick. You'll run from guys like me, because you'll feel like there's this weird, and I'm not trying to hammer on that point. This is actually a new point, but you won't get involved in a group that you need to get involved in, because we are also taught an old contract that men go do it by themselves, and it's bullshit.
They don't.
We need tribe. Men thrive in tribe. Women do also, but men really need that, because we fight everything alone. That's why when you come home, to have a woman that can bring you peace after you've been fighting the world is so important. But you also can't go to that same woman. And I used to think this because I grew up with a single mother. And you think, oh, well, I need to share my feelings with my woman. I just don't agree with that as much. I think in certain areas, yes. But for the most part, there are things that you need a tribe of men that you can go do, because if you share too much, you're going to create instability and vulnerability inside that relationship. She's not going to be able to trust you.
It is true. I wish that it wasn't, but men need men for that. It's
Correct.
True. Also, women don't give men empathy, especially their men. They don't do it easily. And so this is where the men give men empathy, though, very quickly. They can go, dude, I can fucking completely connect with you on that one. Men can give empathy to other men, but women have a hard time empathizing up. They empathize down, no problem, and with other women, no problem. But their man doesn't receive empathy, but men have empathy for women and children.
I think I figured out why that is too, Rick. I think the reason women do that is that they elevate you to a role that they expect you to constantly be on, and you don't get empathy because they don't want you to be off. You don't get an off day.
Well, it shows the level of growth of both, because a high level woman can give empathy to a man, but an untrained woman cannot. I'm going to go back to the part of the strengths of us, because like you were right to catch like that weak. I just meant it's a weak, our weak spot, but not weakness. So good catch. If women are stronger emotionally and spiritually, wouldn't it only make sense that they train to be emotionally more intelligent?
You'd think.
But that would be, this is where society is still, it's mixing women up, which is not easy for women, by the way. This is very hard for them because they're thrust into burden of performance, which men have always had, and they still have burden of beauty, which now they compete with both now.
And as they get older, that becomes more insecure, because a lot of women have gotten by on their looks for 20, 30 years, and then they start getting older and they're like, fuck.
Well, they're measuring their success for burden of performance based off of how far they've gotten with burden of beauty. But once beauty is gone and now I can't keep up with the guys anymore, those women are now struggling because they can't get a relationship, not because of looks, but because they're undateable. Like you have no dating.
They'll get guys using them. They'll get guys using them for sex, and then if they allow that, mostly
them using guys at that point because it would get in the way of their career. You know, and so that's what I'm talking about is those like, I'm strong woman, I don't need a man. Like those ones are falling apart. They're not doing well. But then also the element of women, I think that women are the nurture. And when I work with healthy women, they actually feel more empowered when they're able to be in their nurture, when they're able to be encouraging and fun and playful and enjoy and not have to do what they round up to the nearest everything, which is what they do. They round up, I do everything.
And for the women, you're more beautiful when you're like that. Like when you're sitting there trying to be like, I'm an independent girl and I don't need anybody. That's not fucking attractive. When you sit down and you're playful and you're just being your true, genuine self, I'm just speaking from my own personal perspective. I align with everything you just said there, Rick, because I think that it is so beautiful when a woman just lets herself be beautiful in her innocence of being, I don't want to say a little girl, but like maybe just that innocence. You know what I mean? Instead of the, oh, I got to make more money than you, and I got to do this, and I got to do that. And she's trying to do that burden of performance.
Well, they can't compete. I had one of the girls in our group say it's an important thing to remember that women are not just smaller men. And that's what society right now is trying to push women to do what men do.
Yeah.
Like, you're not just
They're
smaller
not.
men. Like, that's
No.
not how you're wired. We're wired physically and mentally very different. That's our strong side, but you're wired heart and spirit stronger. But you got to remember, even these elements, just watch how these work. Men, the hypergamy element of how a woman chooses a mate is based on the internal potential of what he could do.
Right.
And a woman can see past our facade and go, this guy's got potential to do great. But what's the fuel for the vehicle of potential? It's going to come from the nurture and encouragement of a good woman.
And when she can't remember that and then gets pissed because she's destroying him and then he's not performing,
but if
you
you put
fucking created that.
If you put bad fuel in a good car, it'll destroy the car. And if you have a bad car with good fuel, it's not going anywhere. And so this is where we both have our roles.
Right.
This is important, though. I think it's very important to understand
100%,
that when women are in, I need to purify the fuel, and guys are like, I got to make sure our car is high performance. Like, we're both able to go places because fuel plus vehicle goes fucking fast. You throw God in the mix. Men are the how, women are the why, God is the way. If you put all three together, now you have a team you can't beat.
Correct.
But if you have a person who says, I'm all of them, it shows them who their real God is. And when you have a person who worships only themselves, you're going to have a car that doesn't go anywhere. And this is not true. It doesn't work.
Yeah, dude, and it's so true what you're saying, because then you will also see that the identity starts to shift. Like if a woman isn't giving the man that fuel, and then he can't perform, and then she starts to hate his identity, she is creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yes. And then she's going to come back and go, I just don't think we're compatible. It's not that you're not compatible. You're not fucking feeding each other. You're not giving each other what you need.
Car and then blame the car for bad fuel.
Right. Yeah. And it's equivalent to, like a guy, that isn't, and look, it's on both sides. The man has to nurture also, and he's got to nurture differently. And that's one of the things that I had to learn recently is that, like, I'm an intense dude. I can't be that way, like with my daughter. No. Right. My daughter's like,
it's agreeing with you.
It's agreeing with me. Like, I can't be that with my daughter. Can't be that with your woman. And so when you sit down and you start to look at that, it's got to be something deeper. Right. And I think oftentimes our harshness that we have with ourselves as men, because I've started learning that, like, the funnest version of me, and I have a friend of mine, I used to date her back in the day, and like we became friends. Obviously we don't date anymore, but she knew me longer than any woman that I had dated for like the last probably 10 years. And she was like, dude, there's a version of you that is so freaking fun. She's like, and it's your playful side. And I'm like, that's actually really who I am. But when I get in a defensive mode,
you ever study personality types? Do you know what that means?
Mm-hmm.
Not, you ever go Enneagram? Not Myers-Briggs, Enneagram.
I think the one that I was most recent with was probably that Myers-Briggs one, and then there was another one that they had. But like they remind me of horoscopes to some level, right? Like they're interesting.
Most of them, the Myers-Briggs changes depending on what your mindset is. Your Enneagram doesn't change though. And so I studied Enneagrams far more because it's the most consistent. Myers-Briggs is how you operate. Enneagram is why you do what you do. And there's different levels of health on Enneagram to make it so you understand. I believe you're an 8-7 because I'm an 8-7. It's one of the more aggressive, don't fuck around and find out types that you've got on the Enneagram. It's the challenger type to like the extreme, but also being the 7 wing, which is also the Tigger. That's the let's go have fun, the FOMO, let's go do shit. There's that fun element that's underneath there. But the reason that personality type that you and I have exists is there's an argument that personality type is created, not born. And there's none of our personality types that you can go into their childhood and not go, that was fucking tragic. Like,
Yeah, I agree, dude. I won't argue that at all. I think most of my defensive aggression, if you will, or not, I want to say like aggression, but like just the fact that I'm always on and always looking for what's wrong.
well,
I learned recently that that's not actually useful. It actually
not.
just, it programs you into seeing what's fucking wrong, which makes you not always fun to be around. Right. And so like now one of my big exercises that I do daily is what's right, what's fun. And I've started learning the reticular activating system, which I'm sure you are very familiar with.
I'm realizing. Want to see a trick?
Yeah. Tell me.
Here's a trick to this. If you're out with your daughter and you are having fun, laughing, listening to her stories and having a connection moment, and somebody comes and grabs your daughter's arm, how long does it take for you to switch from like dad, daughter into warrior? Do you need like 5 minutes to switch over? Do you need like, how long do you need to
Here's something
over?
I didn't realize till recently. Just because you're not in go mode all the time doesn't mean you're not going to fucking go.
But
right?
How long does it take you for you to put your armor on?
Oh, dude, instantaneous.
It'll
happen before he touches her.
But this is important. And this is what I train my guys too. If it takes me less than 1 second to switch modes, why am I in that mode all day?
Great question. And so one of the things that I think is really hard for men, or at least has been challenging for me, I didn't realize because I was like, dude, I actually am a fun guy. I want to stay fun longer. But when you have conditioned for 40 years, dude, I remember when I was a kid, and it's one of the things I share with my men. I don't always share this on other podcasts, but I'll share it with your group. I remember that it was almost a period of 6 to 9 months where my mother had to sleep in my room because my stepdad was threatening to kill us in our sleep. Your brain starts to function differently when your survival, I'm not talking like, oh yeah, like, and people go, I had a hard time and I had a hard experience. You didn't fucking go through that shit for 9 months straight.
Correct.
When you're concerned that at any point in time, this person every night is going to try to kill you and your mother, it fucks with your brain and conditions different behaviors. So when people have come up and they've gotten angry with me for that, and they're like, I don't understand why you always go to anger. You don't understand because you don't know what that's like to actually sit there for months on end wondering if you're going to have to kill somebody to keep you and your mother safe.
Correct.
You don't know what it's like to actually go through years of, I'll skip the details, but other abuse where you go, who am I? How do I protect myself and keep myself safe? So when you sit down and you start judging that person based off of, well, you just seem angry. I have to go through that. I'm figuring that out on my own for myself. But, like, am I good at combat? Yeah, dude, because I can fucking turn on anger like nobody's business. Is it useful when you're out having ice cream with your daughter?
No.
It is if somebody goes to touch her. But other than that, dude, you might be fucking up the experience. So one of the things I realized months ago is I'm like, all right, I got to recondition this. And how fast can you recondition it? And I've met a lot of guys that were, it's funny because I meet these dudes and they're like, dude, you would have made an awesome Navy SEAL or an awesome Ranger, an awesome whatever. They're like, because you got that fucking crazy in you. And I was like, look, the reality is that the reason these guys became SEALs or Rangers or anything, the title of SEAL and Ranger or whatever their label is, that's not what makes them badass. What got them to the point of that badass label was something inside of them before they ever went in.
Correct.
And that is something that, like, as a spirit, as a fabric, as men, we need to nurture in each other and teach each other that you can still be a badass and still go have fun. You don't have to see a puppy and fucking kick it down a flight of stairs in order for other men to think you're a man. In fact, the opposite is true. Your ability to actually be gentle and nourishing and nurturing is really where the power is. And I'm not saying I by any means have this mastered. As I already mentioned, I am still working at mastering it on my own, but I see the value in it. And teaching men how to go to combat with their inner war, you got to be able to flick that on. But part of that identity also, I will say in truth and just being in genuine, guys, being gentle and nurturing and loving is really helpful. If you have the right woman around you, she'll also help nurture that. But if she's constantly trying to push your buttons and go, see, you're angry, and then fucking trying to push you to anger so she can play the victim and then put you in some a subservient role, you probably don't have the right woman around you. And she might even be the right woman down in the future when she gets that shit figured out, but she's not the right woman for you right now.
Yeah. And they have to be able to walk away from that. Honor to you on the stepdad and the door thing. I couldn't sleep with my back to the door until my late 30s. So I understand, like, you have to watch the door all night because you don't know when it's going to be. Like,
dude, I locked it.
About.
I we didn't have guns in the house, thank God, because it probably would have happened. But like, I remember one of the things I did, because and it helps me now in my career and in what I teach guys to do. Because like, we didn't have anything, but what I did have was a kitchen knife, and I did have a mason glass jar. And what I would do is I would fill it with like marbles and stuff like that, and I'd put it on the dresser, and then I would tie a string to that jar to the door handle, so if he pulled open the door, it would knock it down. And I strategized this whole thing. Keep in mind, dude, like, I'm like 13, 14 years old. Yeah. And I was like, if it drops, I'll hear it. And I used to practice grabbing the knife underneath my pillow and jumping up and striking it where his throat would be, because I would call him into the room. And I'd be like, hey, wait, can you come here for a minute? And the guy would walk in, and I'd pay attention to where his throat was on the door, and then I'd mark it with a pencil. And then I would practice repeatedly jumping out of bed and stabbing that area, and how I would actually protect my mom and myself. And it's, you can say whatever you want about, like, oh, you poor thing. It wasn't a poor thing. It happened for me so I could be a better man.
I don't sympathize. I empathize. It's not.
Yeah. And I'm not saying you, but I'm saying maybe the listeners might think, oh, you poor thing. There's no poor about it. It's a way of learning how to deal with stress. But then and that worked at the time for that little boy, but that method doesn't work for this man.
No.
But you also have to have somebody nurturing enough that can look at those things and go, you know what, man, I can see why you're a little fucked up in that area. How do we work through that and be patient through that instead of demonizing that approach? Because I think a lot of people forget, as men, a lot of the shit that we go through. And then also as men, we forget the shit that women goes through. So we need to be nurturing on both sides. But sometimes that space that you're talking about is exactly what people need in order to actually come to reality and go, you know what, where have I gone wrong? How could I be better? Here's what I could do better. And it only happens if you're not trying to be right.
Well, it's not control. But yeah, the hard side is not weak side, and men have to suppress hard side. And this is where I say, like, you were, I can relate to you. You were created. Like, your survival, you had to. And this is important. I think the personality type that you and I have is created when run, hide, suppress, negotiate, freeze. Those aren't options.
Yeah.
You don't, those are all removed. You don't get those options. You have to fight.
Nobody gets that, dude. Like, I don't want to say nobody gets that, but a lot of people don't get it because they think, well, you could run or you could hide. There's times you can't.
You can't.
And when those are removed, you learn one fucking thing. You learn one fucking thing. It's fight.
It's it. That's the only option. You have to.
And when you're like me, and I was 135 pounds and 5'7", and the person I got to go against was 6'4", 260 pounds, you fucking pull everything you've got in order to get angry enough to go to war with that person and fight them. And you know how strong they are. You're not strong enough, but you'll die trying.
Yep.
And that's the idea behind the I've got to figure out how to turn the thing off. That's the idea behind the warriorism of men, is like, can you go from that, but then be gentle enough to be the nurturer and the loving person that you need to be? And dude, that's going to take some time.
Yeah. I'm heart to heart on you. That one, you and I would relate heavily on that one. So that style of upbringing, and I'm even with my dad now, I have high closure. I love my dad now, and he was highly abused also. My dad was extremely abused. And so he was just trying to do his best with what he knew, but didn't know better at the time anyways. And he was more a berserker type. So he'd black out and didn't know what the fuck he did to me. Yeah. And we've had to work through those things, and we're good now, but there was a lot of just trauma through the family where it's fucking aggression, just so much rage. And that I can heart to heart with you deeply on, because you had to work through that shit. Have you ever seen how an alpha gorilla works?
I've watched them. I don't understand all the psychology behind it, but I'll give you the
basics, which is kind of helpful for my guys. when they were studying gorillas and they were studying how they work, we are both aware, as badass as we are, we don't want to fight a gorilla. We're both aware, right?
You fuck up real bad there.
They're insanely
They will
powerful.
get you.
They don't even
They can
lift,
rip your
bro.
arms off and beat you to death with your own arms.
And they don't even lift, dude. They're just that strong. Like,
Right.
A silverback gorilla is a powerful animal.
Right.
And what they found was when they were first studying them, like the silverback would be like, get the fuck out of here. Like he would be aggressive towards the camera crews or people studying them. But once they really got to watch how gorillas in the wild really worked, the silverback gorilla was really only aggressive maybe 2% of the time. 98% of the time, you'd see the little ones like, look what I can do. And the silverback would be like, oh, like the encouragement, or I'm proud of you, or good job, or good way to go, kid.
Which is probably why he's so strong, because he's not angry all the time.
Well, there's also the element of if one got hurt, you would see the silverback would be the one holding it. Like, it's okay, and I've got you. And if it only ever have to really be aggressive if there was an external threat, or when one of the adolescent males wanted to fuck around and find out. And then he'd have to whip his ass. So he's like, you're not ready for me yet. And that's why you're not the boss, and so, but that was very rare. It was mostly encouragement, nurture, fun, building up, protection in a healthy way, and very little aggression or dominance in a physical or mean way. Mm-hmm. And this is where I teach my guys to be alpha gorillas. I'm like, if you want to fuck around, you can find out, but that's such a rare thing. It's such a rare thing. Like, there's no way, like, even with me out with my girls, like, you can attest, like, having scary dad privileges is pretty nice because they don't fuck with you.
Yeah.
And so that's such a rare thing, because they'll assess, this one seems competent, I don't want to fuck with this one. But there's a lot of, you can already see, like, this one's not competent, I'd fuck with that one. Well, we don't have that issue very often, so it's a lot more nurture.
They did a study, and I got to say this, and then I got to run because I've got a masterclass I'm going to be teaching here in a little bit. But they were studying pedophiles and how they would pick their victims.
It was on 60 Minutes, yeah.
And the guys that were fathers like us, they didn't want to mess with them.
Strong male in the house, they would skip that house.
Yep, and it's so important to have a strong man inside of your family. So I hope this was beneficial for your listeners, and I hope I added a ton of value to you guys.
Did you have fun?
I did. I enjoyed chatting with you.
Good. Then it worked. That's what it was for. All right, Michael. So our guys can check you out more, and they're like, hey, I want to see more from Michael. Where can I send my guys to be able to say, like, hey, check out Mike's stuff and see what he does? And if you want to get involved in some of your stuff, how can they do that?
I would encourage them to check out our Instagram channel at Shockwave Warrior. Is the handle. And they can also look us up online at shockwavedefense.com. And I'm going to give you a link for them to get a free Dangerous in a Day guide so that they can actually get that. And then if they want to find out more, they can set up a call with our team and link in. And thank you for having me on today. I really love what you're doing, dude, especially now that I have a deeper insight. Maybe after we finish recording, I can throw some stuff at you offline here in a second. But I really love what you're doing for men. I think that's badass.
Hell yeah. You too. It's an honor, brother. Thank you so much. All right, my man.
Thanks so much.
Click on the button and you can become the hero in your own story. It's time to start making the choices to change. And the evolution that you're going to do begins with choosing the next step. This is the way. And together, we're always stronger.